think Hillary's been pretty quiet on that front, and she's enlisted her daughter, Chelsea Clinton, has been out there talking about healthcare.
Right.
So that's been something we've seen just as a initial reaction to the polls.
Yes.
So I'm interested to see again what the tone of this debate is, how civil it is. I hope it's civil. I hope we engage in some substantive discussions.
Yes.
And Hillary's really good with a line. I remember the last debate. May the force be with you. That was smart. That was but it's not. Again, that's not like a real meaningful phrase. It's not. It's just she's definitely playing to the zeitgeist.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing that I think a lot of people are turned off to is the fact that Hillary is perceived as a career politician. She is a career politician. And look, so is Bernie. Bernie's been a career politician as well, but he obviously seems to be a lot more principled. The number one thing that he's running on, his platform, is based on getting money out of politics, and a lot of people are turned on by that message. So Hillary knows that. Hillary knows that he's really gaining popularity, and regardless of how many debates they host on nights that no one's watching, Bernie is getting the word out there about his campaign.
Because it's a grassroots movement. He's not using the traditional outlets for fundraising. He's not using the traditional platforms.
Right.
To get his message out there. So I think it's difficult because for Hillary, it's fighting a foe who is on a totally different, it's like they're on different playing fields.
Yes.
Right?
Well, that is really interesting. And keep in mind that the one thing that Hillary continuously holds on to is Bernie's record on gun control.
Right.
Because she feels that he's not progressive enough. All right, so let's go ahead and toss to the boys in South Carolina. Let's go ahead and talk to them, see what the atmosphere is like in South Carolina, what they've experienced. John, Michael Shore, Jordan, thank you for joining us.
How's it going, Anna?
Hey, pretty good. Oh, look at
we're
you
excited
guys.
to talk to you.
Look at you guys looking all fancy and shit.
Yeah, well, we're trying and everything.
Can Anna Gazarian see me?
Yes, I can
I think
see
she
you.
can, yeah.
Hi, Anna Gazarian.
You're looking
Jordan,
quite
I'm saying hi
dapper.
to you as well.
Hey, Anna.
Hi. All right, so give me a quick summary of what you guys have experienced and noticed today. Maybe some predictions as well.
You want to start off?
Do I want to start off? Predictions. Here's what I'm predicting. I'm predicting that Bernie Sanders released his health plan today, and so they're definitely going to talk about that. Hillary Clinton's brushing up on it as we speak, and a couple of things about it. One of the things that people thought when he said Medicare for all is that it would. One of the criticisms from the Clinton campaign would be that it would put an unfair tax on the middle class. What he's saying is that it's going to bring the top marginal tax rate to 50%.
Wow.
It's also going to add healthcare premiums, which a lot of people thought previously Sanders wouldn't have in there. And then it's going to, there will be a payroll tax increase. So what this does is it dances around the middle class because it makes Hillary Clinton right, but Bernie Sanders can then say, well, 50% top marginal tax rate will cover that.
Yeah.
However, there is a way for Hillary Clinton to play on this for electability, because she could go and say, hey, listen, we're not going to win a general election with a guy proposing a 50% top marginal tax rate. Not because it's just wealthy people who are undecided or may come to Clinton, but there are people that see taxation as too high in general, and they stay away from that. She's probably going to play on electability. If not tonight, she's going to do it over the next week or so.
And you think they either won't get or won't really care if it doesn't personally impact them?
Right. I think probably. In a Democratic primary, obviously less dangerous. She's going to have answers for that. It helps him with this crowd, certainly, when he says 50% top marginal tax rate. But
it's a number that stands out. Like you hear it, and it
stands out. But also the other part of it is there are healthcare premiums involved here.
Yeah.
The sexiest part about what Bernie Sanders has been saying is that there are no, or people have been presuming he's going to say, is that there are no healthcare premiums. So it's not really Medicare for all.
The sexy part is everybody's covered.
Well, that is healthcare for all. That's right. You're 100% right.
He's going to say, yes, you're paying more in taxes, but I'm going to show you that once you take out the $6,000 per year you were spending on health insurance, you were making money off of this.
But which is a little bit harder. At the end of the day, we're sitting here arguing what the sexiest part of Bernie Sanders is. So
which is incredible.
What's your prediction?
Well, I think the sexiest part to many, and Sanders is going to say the top rate is going to be 52%. A lot of people have been slamming him, saying, oh, he might tax you at 90%.
Yeah.
Now we know it's going to be 52%. I also think tonight you might see Sanders, since basically nobody will be watching, really be a little bit more aggressive so we can get in the cycle tomorrow. Because I think with Sanders, he always kind of eloquently, critiques Secretary Clinton, I think you might see a little bit more aggressive tonight, just because of what the Sanders campaign has endured this week.
Yeah.
Suggesting he releases medical records and these kinds of things. I think you might see a more feisty Bernie today, which I think is going to play well.
I think that's a possibility.
How much more feisty can Bernie Sanders be, though? Honestly,
he's feisty in an internal against, the economic elites, the political.
But what the first adjective you would use about him is feisty?
Yeah, his hair, certainly. I somewhat disagree. I think that he might end up doing that, but I think that especially considering one of the big changes for this debate and for the other one, I mean, she had started some of her critiques of his gun policy for the most part, but many of the attacks that we've been focusing on all week are new, and so I think she's going to be trotting those out. It's a little bit harder now that he's released his plan. He undercut her a little bit on that. She'll shift it over to critiquing the numbers, as I think you're saying. But I think that she is going to be doing a lot of that, and I think he is going to be forced to play defense. Mm-hmm. Maybe he can combine that with a couple of punches at her, but I don't see him doing that. I hope to see it, but I don't think I will.
It's not really Bernie's style to do that, and I think you hit the nail on the head, John. Bernie attacks, but he's really bad at attacking Hillary specifically. He's going after the corporations, he's going after the big banks, he's going after the status quo, but he's not an aggressive debater, and I think that Hillary is now at a point where she feels threatened by Bernie, at least to some extent, which is why she attacked him on Jake Tapper's show today and basically called out his record on gun control.
But I think she is. I think he is an aggressive debater. I think that there's the things on which they disagree and that there is a divide are not that many. I mean, that's the problem. So I think that his passions about debating her is that they agree on so much. When you cut through all of the personality and the demeanor and the calmness and the feistiness, and I think he's feisty, that there is so much agreement on what they are talking about that it's very difficult to debate someone that way.
Yeah, right. I disagree because I think they agree on so much now, but Bernie's never turned to her and said, over your career, 4 out of your top 10 donors are big banks. Yeah. Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan. He's never really put it out there in specifics when she's talking about that. Oh, I know, I was the 9/11 senator. These kinds of things. If he comes at her specifically, what is your credibility on this? You're being bankrolled by these people.
Right, but if she were anyway, there's a longer argument to have about it. It's not an unfair remark to make, right? But the political reality of it is that everyone's bankrolled by these because of our money in politics situation right now. You cannot run for president without a bit of bankroll. And listen, if Bernie Sanders wins the nomination, he's going to be getting money from wealthy people, or he's going to lose, which I think he would do anyway if he got the nomination. But that remains to be seen. But I do think that that they're on policy, general policy, there's so much that's alike that getting into a you're not going to see Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz tonight. You're not going to see Chris Christie and Marco Rubio tonight. You're not going to see that kind of difference.
You could talk about breaking up the big banks. You could talk about Glass-Steagall. I mean, there are but
there you hit on it. But you guys keep going to that. Keep going. Keep going. Right?
Wait, hold on. I think Anna's trying to cut in for a second.
Yeah, sorry guys. I just wanted to bring up a quick Wall Street Journal poll that I thought was really interesting. So I know that Hillary is very likely to attack Bernie's electability, especially in a general election, and that's going to scare a lot of Democrats because Democrats don't want to lose the general election. But there was a Wall Street Journal poll that indicated that in a general election between Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump, Bernie Sanders would win at 54%, Donald Trump at 39%. Michael, what do you think about that? I'm really curious to see what your perspective.
I never like those polls. I don't like national polls that have her up 20 some odd. I don't believe that for a second that she's these national polls. The polls that matter are the polls that are in Iowa, South Carolina, and New Hampshire. Head-to-head polls at this stage don't matter. I mean, listen, in 2004, today in 2004, Howard Dean was going to win the nomination. Today in 2008, by a lot, by 9.8 points, Hillary Clinton was going to win. So national. I'm talking about national polls. So those are, so Anna, they're certainly, it's seductive to look at them, read them, and think, oh, this is pretty cool. But I don't think that they matter. And when it comes to Hillary, I think the common sort of sense right now is that, it would be very difficult for Bernie Sanders to be an establishment Republican, but Donald Trump is kind of a wild card, and nobody knows how to go with that.
I think it would be more fair to say we shouldn't be focusing on these head-to-head matchups if he was the one making the case for electability, but she's making the one. And so when she makes that claim, you then say, okay, what evidence do we have? and you have him beating Trump by 6 or 7 points more than she does. You have her losing to Cruz, but him beating Cruz. So to the extent that we have any evidence to address this issue, which she has raised, the evidence undercuts her claim. Well, and I agree. I mean, it's so long and so much is going to happen.
And what you're saying and what Anna's implying, that's true. I mean, yeah, of course, we don't have hard evidence, but we have history. And history shows you that when you have candidates who are perceived in the way that a gadfly, somebody who's coming in there to disrupt the establishment like Bernie Sanders is on paper, that person does less well against another establishment. Once you get there. But that doesn't mean, I mean, listen, every Democrat would vote for Bernie Sanders. It's not like people would run away from him. It's just attracting other voters and also makes it easier people think for an establishment Republican to attract voters. So, and Trump Sanders, who knows? I mean, it's a coin toss.
Yeah. Anna, can I ask you a question, actually?
Sure, go ahead.
Do you think, I've been thinking all day about the expectations that we can and should have for each of the candidates, obviously each of them looking to get something different out of this particular debate, but seeing as this is the only debate that we'll have before the Iowa and I believe New Hampshire contests, do you think that...
The only Democratic debate, there's a
Democratic
Iowa,
debate, sorry, that's that if O'Malley doesn't stand out in some significant way that I've tried to come up with examples of and I can't, for whatever reason he's pulling at 2 or 4%, even though I think his debate performances lately have been perfectly adequate. Do you think that this could possibly be his last debate as a candidate for the Democratic Party?
Absolutely. I'm actually surprised that he's going to be part of this debate. I think having him be part of it is a huge waste of time. I don't even know why he hasn't dropped out yet. He's so low in polling. And look, his debate performance, understand, especially during the last debate, was perfectly fine. You're absolutely right about that. But he is the definition of vanilla. Like, he is the definition of a scripted, robotic, what you can expect from a politician. That's not to say that I disagree with him on a lot of policy ideas. I just feel like his performance is very traditional, very stereotypical of a politician. And obviously Hillary has a little bit of that in her as well, which is what turns a lot of young voters off to her, I think. So I think that if he was smart, he would drop out after this debate.
Well, what do you think, Jordan? Do you think this could be his last debate, or do you think he has something in him that he'll show now?
I've been covering South Carolina all this week, so I've seen O'Malley speak a few times. I mean, for whatever reason, he's in it to win it. I think he thinks he's going to win, or he wants to be vice president.
Amazing. It's amazing.
I think he'd probably drop out after New Hampshire.
Yeah. What do you think? Am I being presumptuous?
No, I think he goes after Iowa. I don't.
Yeah. You think he gets 1%?
Or whatever he gets there, and that's it. I mean, if he wants to play the John Edwards role, he's not doing it as well as John Edwards did at that time.
Yeah.
So
his hair is not nice.
But actually, it's pretty.
Yeah, he's got great hair. I like his hair.
He does have great hair. Speaking of that, Johnny, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Now, Johnny, I've noticed that your socks don't match your shirt as well as Michael's do. In fact, he matches the stripe in his tie. Now, do you see that as at a disadvantage to you? Is that a rookie mistake? Because your first, it's kind of a rookie mistake, your first live coverage of a debate. So, what do you say?
I mean, can we even see his
socks? Can I just say you sound weird now? You sound weird. You sound awful.
Yeah. I'm not going to lie. It's a gap. Is it one I can recover from? I'm hoping that I will be the Joe Biden of socks, and people take it as like a quirky sort of sock thing. That's really the only chance I have at this point.
I mean, that's the thing. If I was going to go, Michael had already tipped me off to this. He's like, make sure you bring the right socks because the camera catches your socks. And I was like, thanks for that. So that's a profession. What's that? I missed that.
All right, so tell me what the atmosphere is like over there. Have you guys experienced anything interesting or fun, anything worth reporting about?
Well, here's what I will tell you. I've been to every Democratic. Well, no, I missed the Manchester one. So I've been to, but that's the only debate I've missed of all the debates this year.
What socks did you wear there?
The socks that I wore, Jimmy. Let me check.
Jimmy keeping us on topic.
I'll be right back.
Okay.
It's a little bit. There's a lot of activity outside. It's a little bit more vibrant here than it has been for any of the Democratic debates. I think also because the debate is happening about 100 yards from where we are, and it's usually 7 buildings away from where we are. So I think that probably contributes to it. A lot of Bernie and Hillary supporters outside. Another interesting thing to tell you is that we're about, 3 football fields away from the Mother Emanuel AME Church, where horrific shooting happened in June. And this morning I went to services there, and so here's an interesting story. Bernie Sanders was there. Eric Holder was seated in the same pew as he was, and Eric Holder last week endorsed Hillary Clinton. And the pastor at a certain point introduced all the guests who were there. I wasn't there as press. I just went. And the woman next to me with whom I'd been talking, he introduces, and it's Sabrina Fulton, who was Trayvon Martin's mom.
Wow.
And so I was sitting next to her the whole time, and Sabrina Fulton had just endorsed Hillary Clinton as well. And so there was, Bernie Sanders was obviously received graciously, and it was very strategic for him to be there. Guns were talked about by the pastor, by Holder, by Sabrina Fulton, and Bernie Sanders was there. But that's interesting. It's right down the block, and it's a moving thing to see.
I'd like to add in something a little less gracious. As I was covering the pre-debate activities outside, across the street were actually Benghazi Lives Matter protesters, pretty much a feet or two near the church. So I asked them, do you think it's appropriate to be in front of a church that 9 people got killed at? Talking about Benghazi Lives Matter, kind of a play on Black Lives Matter. They feigned ignorance. They didn't even realize they were in front of the church.
That's amazing. Well,
Benghazi's out full force.
It doesn't surprise me that they'd be ignorant about that. I mean, especially considering what they're, protesting about. All right. So, tell me more. So, Michael, we haven't really talked too much about, your endorsement, which candidate you're leaning in favor of. I know that you were a staunch Hillary supporter, when she ran.
Holding that torch for Chafee still.
It was a long time ago. Before Anna, I was neutral.
You were neutral. Are you neutral in this election, or
until the end of April, when my network goes out of business? I'm absolutely
fair enough.
So yes, I'm neutral, Anna. But look to my past, and you'll see a little bit of the present.
Okay.
That's my.
No, Michael.
Put in there. They have this big crowd outside with supporters for Hillary and for Bernie, and it looked like they were roughly the same numbers. There was a good portion of each, and they had blanketed the lawns with signs. And I looked around, and I really tried to find a single O'Malley sign, and there wasn't. Is that a sign that he's moved all of his campaign infrastructure to New Hampshire, maybe? Like, that's where he's going to make his stand?
He's been in Iowa a lot. I mean, I think probably you've seen him down here, but he spent a lot of time in Iowa. I do think that's going to be his last stand. I don't see how he goes beyond that. Just a side note here, Bernie Sanders, you just saw walking into the venue and shaking Debbie Wasserman Schultz's hand.
Oh!
John spoke to Debbie Wasserman Schultz. That had
Michael, I think that's the Muppet that plays the piano. That's not Debbie.
How was
well, Elmo shook her hand. It turns out.
How was John's? I just wanted to ask you how your discussion with her was, especially considering how critical we've been of her.
Yeah, well, thankfully she didn't see any of those videos beforehand.
Good.
So it was very rushed, and I only had time to ask her a few questions, and so I really tried to drill down into the lack of debates and the scheduling of the debates, and she's been repeating the line all day that, well, of course, this one had to be on a weekend because it's South Carolina, it's MLK Day soon, and all that. I didn't find that to be the most persuasive argument, but it was the lack of debates. And when you combine that, I was telling Michael this earlier, when you combine, well, we're limited by what the TV networks will do. They just won't put us on more often. And you immediately say, we're getting record ratings, we're blowing the roof off with the ratings. Well, then you take that to the networks and you schedule more debates.
Right.
And so I tried to get her to crack at least a little bit under that. I even led in a very, I think, diplomatic way. I said, let's say I'm a big Hillary supporter, and I say Hillary's a great debater. I want to see her debate. I want the country to see her debate. Don't you want to see her debate? But she was unflappable. At least I couldn't flap.
Can I ask Michael a question? Michael, when your network goes off the air, how much do you think that will help your rating?
Here's the thing, Jimmy. There'll be like 11 fewer people to get to see me every day. Is that what you're getting at, Jimmy?
I don't know. I don't know anything.
I know that. I've known that for years.
I'm revealing that.
So, Jimmy, I have a question for you. Do you think that us not being in the studio with you, do you think that will help you to win the Twitter war tonight? or do you think your odds are about the same as usual?
Damn.
I think I'm gonna.
Fired.
I think I will probably crush you tonight.
Oh.
Okay, well, I will be looking at those numbers. We'll see.
What's this Twitter war?
One of our favorite hobbies now is when we're watching the debates, we live tweet them,
Right.
and the goal is to get the most retweets on a single tweet out of the night.
Oh, that's pretty great.
Yeah,
I might get in the game tonight.
You might.
At Jordan Sheridan.
I retweeted last
Bring
night
it.
one of Bernie's infographics showing him against the different Republicans, beating them by a bunch, and that got a lot. And Jimmy once had I'm sure he had something.
I only, your graphic that someone else made did get retweeted a lot. I actually wrote a joke that
I
actually.
totally understand what I was doing.
Yes. Well, the Republicans, the GOP says that Obama soft on terrorism, Bin Laden unavailable for comment, got 1,1200 retweets. That's
okay, well, then
that's not a real number.
Oh, good. Well, I'm really excited about this Twitter pissing
Yeah,
match.
yeah.
I said that's not a real number.
Excited. Can't
So, I
wait.
know we only have just a couple of more minutes. Is there anything in particular that we're hoping to see out of this that we might not expect to, but that probably not Martin O'Malley, but especially Hillary and Bernie, that they can say to perhaps sway those of us who are becoming increasingly strident in our support of one candidate? Is there anything that could be said?
I don't think so. I don't think there's not one kind of eureka moment that I can even imagine happening here, unless Martin O'Malley comes up and says, I've spoken with the FBI, and in fact they're going to start an investigation, and that's that. I mean, there has to be that kind of breaking news, which in point of fact, you can talk about it in jest, but that's probably why someone like Martin O'Malley is hanging around, waiting for, and it's why John Edwards did to a certain extent too. It's why people stick around, waiting for some kind of an implosion, and to a degree, I think that's why Jeb Bush is sticking around too. To be honest, now at this point, he was going to be the front runner. People waiting for Trump to go the other way. It's not happening. So,
and for months that seemed very reasonable.
Yeah. So there would have to be breaking news that it will not happen on the platform tonight, in my opinion.
I hope this isn't the case, but I also am expecting this to be a love fest to President Obama. He's very popular among South Carolina Democrats. At the event I was at last night, Hillary Clinton had a love blanket over him.
Yeah.
Every sentence came out with President Obama.
Yeah, that's a good point. She's talking a lot about him. And one thing that we should talk about, guys, is that this is the Congressional Black Caucus debate. So the issues of race, issues that have affected the black community over the past 4 to 7 years, and this year, in 2015, I think those are the kinds of things you're going to hear about. Black Lives Matter here. You're going to hear those sorts of themes. So I think that might be interesting. I don't think you're going to see a lot of disagreement over it, but
especially with it being in Charleston, and especially with this is South Carolina, and Bernie. Obviously, people are already starting to talk about his potential problem with courting minority voters.
Yeah.
So
especially black voters. Very especially black voters.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's curious to me, but it's still true.
Well, Anna, I think that we actually have to dump out because the debate is about to start here, but we're going to be watching your live coverage for the next 2 hours, and then, of course, we will have our post coverage of the debate.
All right, sounds good. We'll definitely hit you guys up later after the debate's over.
It was great talking to you. I miss you.
Great talking to you, too. Miss you as well.
Great talking to you.
All right, guys.
Johnny, Michael, bro tip. See you guys later.
Jimmy, go after yourself.
Jimmy, yeah.
All right, guys. So the debate's going to start shortly in less than 1 minute, according to the timer. I just want to make a quick clarification of something I said to Michael early on when I talked to him. So when I say that Bernie is not an aggressive debater, I don't mean that he's not aggressive in terms of his ideology. He's just not the type of politician that hits below the belt.
Which I applaud him for.
I applaud him for that, exactly. So, look, I think that unfortunately he is going to be playing a lot of defense because Hillary does plan on being aggressive herself and attacking him quite a bit, especially when it comes to...
and Hillary will take your knees out.
Yeah, she will. I don't see him responding in a Trump-like fashion, kind of like how Cruz was talking about New Yorkers and then Trump basically punched him in the face with 9/11. I don't see Bernie responding with any type of under-the-belt reaction like that.
No way.
Yeah.
He's going to reserve his powder for the millionaires and billionaires and Debbie Wasserman and Silks.
Yes. Oh, look at him. He's so cute. Just looking at him, waving makes me love him.
He's just precious.
Well, the fact that he now is, it seems like he can win, right? Like everybody's stopping saying
So
that.
I wonder what Bernie looks like in a debate, and we're about to find out, under the auspices of not being the complete underdog, right? I mean, this is a different dynamic we're going to experience here. So I really hope he sticks it to him. I want to see Bernie You know, I want to feel the burn.
I wonder if they're going to bring, the healthcare is going to come up, so I wonder if he's going to bring up, all the time she congratulated him for working towards single payer, right? And then the time that she castigated Barack Obama for coming after her for advocating for single payer. So this would be, that's the thing I'm looking for if that comes up. Those kind of contradictions that she's been revealed to be having, because the opposition research that the Bernie Sanders people are doing has been top notch on that, I think.
Really smart about finding these.
Yes, that thing that contradicts what her attack.
Talking out of both sides.
Yeah, it's like, oh no, we're not contradicting your attack. You're contradicting your own attack, which is the best thing you can do.
It's just difficult because when it gets complex like that for viewers and they start getting, for the audience members and they start throwing around all these complexities about you said this and that. I hope that it's an accessible debate. I always hope that, and it just doesn't get so wonky that the people watching, which will be 5 who aren't watching football and who aren't sitting around jerking off because it's a holiday weekend.
Yes, I mean I think a lot of people are sitting around jerking off because it's a holiday weekend, which is why this debate.
It's so frustrating.
That's why I'm like, where am I going to fit in my jerking off? Because I have to be
you have to be here.
Right? Yeah, and of course they just sandwich you between us, and here we are. No, but I think the Hillary campaign is now, of course, really wishing they had more debates for her to show off. And, I think that the strategy of playing it really quiet and trying to bury this entire, the fight they have with Bernie and I guess with O'Malley.
I mean, it's certainly, their strategy of burying Bernie's message certainly didn't work. So doing these weekend debates, maybe it worked to some extent, but Bernie's still doing really well in Iowa and New Hampshire.
So NBC came out with a poll today where he's ahead of Trump. Bernie by 15 points. Hillary's only ahead of Trump by 10 points. This is nationally. And I say the more people get to know Bernie, the wider that better will get.
So you're going to notice one huge difference between this debate and the debate you watched a few days ago for the Republicans. They're actually going to talk about policy. They're going to talk about policy so much that you might get a little bored, okay? Yeah. But it's important. It shows you the stark difference, the contrast between Democrats and Republicans. There's going to be a lot less emotional attacks, which you saw during the Republican debate. There are probably going to be some below-the-belt attacks, but not as many as you saw during the Republican debate. It might get a little wonky, but it's important. Let's go ahead and cut to the debate.
Hosting us here on the eve of Martin Luther King Day tomorrow. I remember well when my youth minister took me to hear Dr. King. I was a teenager, and his moral clarity, the message that he conveyed that evening, really stayed with me and helped to set me on a path to service. I also remember that he spent the last day of his life in Memphis, fighting for dignity and higher pay for working people, and that is our fight still. We have to get the economy working and incomes rising for everyone, including those who have been left out and left behind. We have to keep our communities and our country safe. We need a president who can do all aspects of the job. I understand that this is the hardest job in the world. I'm prepared and ready to take it on, and I hope to earn your support to be the nominee of the Democratic Party and the next president of the United States.
This is great pizza. I think this really good pizza. Oh, look at him. I wish you would adopt me.
We honor the extraordinary life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It's important not only that we remember what he stood for, but that we pledge to continue his vision to transform our country. And as we look out at our country today, what the American people understand, we have an economy that's rigged. That ordinary Americans are working longer hours for lower wages, 47 million people living in poverty, and almost all of the new income and wealth going to the top 1%. And then, to make a bad situation worse, we have a corrupt campaign finance system where millionaires are spending extraordinary amounts of money to buy elections. This campaign is about a political revolution to not only elect the president, but to transform this country. Senator, thank you.
And Governor O'Malley, you're up and say it too. Thank you. My name is Martin O'Malley. I was born the year Dr. King delivered his I Have a Dream speech. And I want to thank the people of South Carolina not only for hosting our debate here tonight,
He is.
but also for what you taught all of us in the aftermath of the tragic shooting.
He's a nice total solar
He's not my type at all.
In keeping with Dr. King's teaching, that love would have the final word when you took down the Confederate flag from your state house. Let go of the past and
More of a rebel.
8 years ago,
Johnny Depp.
you brought forward a new leader in Barack Obama to save our country from the Second Great Depression.
There he goes.
And that's what he's done.
Okay.
Our country's doing better. We're creating jobs again. But in order to make good on the promise of equal opportunity and equal justice under the law, we have urgent work to do, and the voices of anger and fear and division that we've heard coming off of the Republican presidential podiums are pretty loud. We need new leadership. We need to come together as a people and build on the good things that President Obama has done. That's why I'm running for president. I need your
sounds like a whole time. We need to come together and find solutions. I'm going to use this to say nothing at my time. My opening is going to be nothing.
He really thinks that he
question I'll be addressing to all of the candidates. President Obama came to office determined to swing for the fences on healthcare reform. Voters want to know how you would define your presidency. How would you think big? So complete this sentence. In my first 100 days in office, my top 3 priorities will be fill in the blank. Senator Sanders.
Well, that's what our campaign is about. It is thinking big. It is understanding that in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, we should have health care for every man, woman, and child as a right, that we should raise the minimum wage to at least $15 an hour, that we have got to create millions of decent-paying jobs by rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure. So what my first days are about is bringing America together to end the decline of the middle class, to tell the wealthiest people in this country that yes, they are going to start paying their fair share of taxes, and that we are going to have a government that works for all of us and not just big campaign contributors.
Secretary Clinton, same question. My first 100 days in office, my top 3 priorities will be.
I would work quickly to present to the Congress my plans for creating more good jobs in manufacturing, infrastructure, clean and renewable energy, raising the also guaranteeing finally equal pay for women's work. I would also be presenting my plans to build on the Affordable Care Act and to improve it by decreasing the out-of-pocket costs, by putting a cap on prescription drug costs, by looking for ways that we can put the prescription drug business and the health insurance company business on a more stable platform that doesn't take too much money out of the pockets of hardworking Americans. And third, I would be working in every way that I knew to bring our country together. We do have too much division, too much mean-spiritedness. There's a lot we have to do on immigration reform, on voting rights, on campaign finance reform. But we need to do it together. That's how we'll have the kind of country for the 21st century that we know
need to get a
will guarantee our
and then
children
ram that shit down their fucking throats.
They deserve.
And that's how it's always been. How do you think?
Thank you. First of all, I would lay out an agenda to make wages go up again for all Americans rather than down. Equal pay for equal work. Making it easier rather than harder for people to join labor unions and bargain collectively for better wages. Getting 11 million of our neighbors out of the underground shadow economy by passing comprehensive immigration reform. Raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour however we can, wherever we can. Secondly, I believe the greatest business opportunity to come to the United States of America in 100 years is climate change. And I look forward to
look at that.
100% clean electric energy grid by 2050 and create 5 million jobs along the way. Third and finally, we need a new agenda for America's cities. We have not had a new agenda for America's cities since Jimmy Carter. We need a new agenda for America's cities that will invest in the talents and the skills of our people, that will invest in CDBG, transportation, infrastructure, and transit options, and make our cities the leading edge in this move to a redesigned, built, clean, green energy future that will employ our people.
All right,
I like green energy. Okay, fine. You can stay, O'Malley. Yeah.
Cover a lot of the ground you talked about as we continue in the evening. The last couple of weeks of this campaign have featured some of the sharpest exchanges in the race. Let's start with one of them, the issue of guns.
Ooh, we're headed
Senator
to
Sanders,
Here we go.
This week, Secretary Clinton called you, quote, a pretty reliable vote for the gun lobby. Right before the debate, you changed your position on immunity from lawsuits for gun manufacturers. Can you tell us why?
Well, I think Secretary Clinton knows that what she says is very disingenuous. I have a D- voting record from the NRA.
He does.
I was in 1988. There were 3 candidates running for Congress in the state of Vermont. I stood up to the gun lobby and came out and maintained the position that in this country, we should not be selling military-style assault weapons. I have supported from day one an instant background check to make certain that people who should not have guns do not have guns. And that includes people with criminal backgrounds, people who are mentally unstable. I support what President Obama is doing in terms of trying to close the gun show loopholes, and I think it should be a federal crime if people act as strawmen. We have seen in this city a horrendous tragedy of a crazed person praying with people and then coming out and shooting 9 people. This should not be a political issue. What we should be doing is working together. And by the way, as a senator from a rural state that has virtually no gun control, I believe that I am in an excellent position to bring people together
Senator,
to fight for sensible
But you did answer the question that you did change your position on immunity for gun manufacturers. So can you
What
answer
I
questions
have
for why?
said is that the gun manufacturers liability bill had some good provisions. Among other things, we prohibited ammunition that would have killed cops who had protection on. We had child safety protection on guns in that legislation. And what we also said is a small mom and pop gun shop who sells a gun legally to somebody should not be held liable if somebody does something terrible with that gun. So what I said is I would relook at it. We are going to relook at it, and I will support stronger provisions.
Secretary Clinton, would you like to respond to Senator Sanders?
Yes. Look, I have made it clear, based on Senator Sanders' own record, that he has voted with the NRA, with the gun lobby, numerous times. He voted against the Brady bill 5 times. He voted for what we call the Charleston loophole. He voted for immunity from gun makers and sellers, which the NRA said was the most important piece of gun legislation in 20 years. He voted to let guns go onto Amtrak, guns go into national parks. He voted against doing research to figure out how we can save lives. Let's not forget what this is about. 90 people a day die from gun violence in our country. That's 33,000 people a year. One of the most horrific examples, not a block from here, where we had 9 people murdered. Now,
I hammer him on this.
Yeah, hear that Senator Sanders has reversed his position on immunity, and I look forward to him joining with those members of Congress who have already introduced legislation. There is no other industry in America that was given the total pass that the gun makers and dealers were, and that needs to be reversed.
All right, Governor O'Malley, you signed tough gun control measures as governor of Maryland, and there are a lot of Democrats in the audience here in South Carolina who own guns. This conversation might be worrying many of them. They may be hearing, you want to take my guns. What would you say to them?
Yeah, this is what I would say, Lester. Look, I've listened to Secretary Clinton and Senator Sanders go back and forth on which of them has the most inconsistent record on gun safety legislation, and I would have to agree with both of them. They've both been inconsistent when it comes to this issue. I'm the one candidate on this stage that actually brought people together to pass comprehensive gun safety legislation. This is very personal to me, being from Baltimore. I will never forget one occasion visiting a little boy in Johns Hopkins Hospital. He was getting a birthday haircut at the age of 3 when drug dealers turned that barbershop into a shooting gallery, and that boy's head was pierced with a bullet. And I remember visiting him. It did not kill him. I remember visiting him and his mother in Johns Hopkins Hospital, and his diapers with tubes running in and out of his head. Same age as my little boy.
He loves anecdotes.
So after the slaughter of the kids in Connecticut, Lester, we brought people together. We did pass in our state comprehensive gun safety legislation, it did have a ban on combat assault weapons, universal background checks. And you know what? We did not interrupt a single person's hunting season. I've never met a self-respecting deer hunter that needed an AR-15 to down a deer. And so we were able to actually...
This is a community that has suffered a lot of heartache in the last year. Of course, as you mentioned, the church shootings. We won't forget the video of Walter Scott being shot in the back while running from police. We understand that a jury will decide whether that police officer was justified, but it played straight to the fears of many African American men. Their lives are cheap. Is that perception, or in your view, is it reality?
Well, sadly, it's reality. And it has been heartbreaking and incredibly outraging to see the constant stories of young men like Walter Scott, as you said, who have been killed by police officers. There needs to be a concerted effort to address the systemic racism in our criminal justice system. And that requires a very clear agenda for retraining police officers,
anyone's going
looking
to get
at ways to end racial profiling, finding more ways to really bring the disparities that stalk our country into high relief. 1 out of 3 African American men may well end up going to prison. That's the statistic. I want people here to think what we would be doing if it was 1 out of 3 white men. And very often the black men are arrested, convicted, and incarcerated for offenses that do not lead to the same results for white men. So we have a very serious problem that we can no longer ignore.
Your time is up. Senator Sanders, my next question is actually my next question is for you.
To what the Secretary said. We have a criminal justice system which is broken. Who in America is satisfied that we have more people in jail than any other country on earth, including China, disproportionately African American and Latino? Who is satisfied that 51% of African American young people are either unemployed or underemployed? Who is satisfied that millions of people have police records for possessing marijuana when the CEOs of Wall Street companies who destroyed our economy have no police records?
Senator Sanders.
We need to take a very hard look at our criminal justice system, investing in jobs and education, not in jail and incarceration.
Just over a week ago, the chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus endorsed Secretary Clinton, not you. He said that choosing her over you was not a hard decision. In fact, our polling shows she's beating you more than 2 to 1 among minority voters. How can you be the nominee if you don't have that support?
Well, let me talk about polling. The Secretary...
Oh, now he's stoked.
Yeah.
When this campaign began, she was 50 points ahead of me. We were all of 3 percentage points. Guess what? In Iowa, New Hampshire, the race is very, very close. Maybe we're ahead in New Hampshire. In terms of polling, guess what? We are running ahead of Secretary Clinton in terms of taking on my good friend Donald Trump, beating him by 19 points in New Hampshire, 13 points in the last national poll that I saw. To answer your question, when the African American community becomes familiar with my congressional record and with our agenda and with our views on the economy and criminal justice, just as the general population has become more supportive, so will the African American community, so will the Latino community. We have the momentum. We're on a path to a victory.
All right, get it.
Okay. I like that.
For the words Black Lives Matter surpassed civil rights movement last year. And here in South Carolina, Black Lives Matter was the #1 trending political issue. Governor O'Malley, you've campaigned on your record as governor of Maryland and before that the mayor of Baltimore. Last year, of course, Baltimore was rocked by violent unrest in the wake of the death of Freddie Gray. And right from the start of your campaign, you've been dogged by those who blame your tough-on-crime, so-called zero-tolerance policies as mayor for contributing to that unrest. What responsibility do you bear?
Yeah, let's talk about this. When I ran for mayor in 1999, Lester, it was not because our city was doing well. It was because we were burying over 300 young, poor black men every single year. And that's why I ran, because, yes, black lives matter. And we did a number of things.
Oh, what happened to all lives matter? You used to say that, remember? Remember you used to say that, Dum-Dum?
Unrest and tragic death showed. But we were able to save a lot of lives, doing things that actually work to improve police and community relations.
Like by not understanding what Black Lives Matter meant for a long time?
Many of these things are in the new agenda for criminal justice reform that I put forward. We created a civilian review board, gave them their own detectives. We required the reporting of discourtesy, use of excessive force, lethal force. I repealed the possession of marijuana as a crime in our state. I drove our incarceration rate down to 20-year lows and drove violent crime down to 30-year lows and became the first governor south of the Mason-Dixon line to repeal the death penalty. I feel a responsibility every day to find things that work.
All right, let's talk more about policing and the criminal justice system. Senator Sanders, a few times tonight we're going to hear from some of the most prominent voices on YouTube, starting with Francesca Ramsey, who tackles racial stereotypes through her videos. Let's watch.
Hey, I'm Francesca Ramsey. I believe there's a huge conflict of interest when local prosecutors investigate cases of police violence within their own communities. For example, last month, the officers involved in the case of 12-year-old Tamir Rice weren't indicted. How would your presidency ensure that incidents of police violence are investigated and prosecuted fairly?
Senator Sanders.
I apologize for not hearing all of that question.
Would you like me to read it back to you?
Yeah.
Prosecutors, I believe there's a huge conflict of interest when local prosecutors investigate cases of police violence within their communities. Mm-hmm. Most recently, we saw this with the non-indictment of the officers involved in the case of 12-year-old Tamir Rice. How would your presidency ensure incidents of police violence are investigated and prosecuted fairly?
This is a responsibility for the U.S. Justice Department to get involved. Whenever anybody in this country is killed while in police custody, this should automatically trigger a U.S. Attorney General's investigation.
Yeah.
And I speak as a mayor who worked very closely and well with police officers, the vast majority of whom are honest, hardworking people trying to do a difficult job. But let us be clear. If a police officer breaks the law, like any public official, that officer must be held accountable. And thirdly, we have got to demilitarize our police departments so they don't look like occupying armies. We got to move toward community policing. And fourthly, we have got to make our police departments look like the communities they serve in their diversity.
Secretary Clinton, this question is for you. Tonight, parts of America are in the grip of a deadly heroin epidemic, spanning race and class, hitting small towns and cities alike. It's become a major issue in this race. In a lot of places where you've been campaigning, despite an estimated $1 trillion spent, many say the war on drugs has failed. So what would you do?
Well, Lester, you're right. Everywhere I go to campaign, I'm meeting families who are
great. I'm great you're meeting people.
The drug problem that mostly is opioids and heroin now, and lives are being lost.
And what have you done?
Children are being orphaned.
And what have you done? What do you say? Do you want to legalize marijuana? Or do you just have to?
So I have tried to come out with a comprehensive approach.
What is your comprehensive approach? Legalize marijuana?
States that we will work with you from the federal government, putting more money, about $1 billion a year,
into more prisons,
to help states have a different approach to dealing with this epidemic.
What?
The policing needs to change. Police officers must be equipped with the antidote to a heroin overdose or an opioid overdose, known as Narcan. They should be able to administer it. So should firefighters and others.
Not the problem.
We have to move away from treating the use of drugs as a crime.
She's not even talking about this Francesca question.
As a health issue.
No.
We need to divert more people from the criminal justice system.
You mean move away or stop treating drugs like that? Move away or stop.
Approach that we should take.
That's the kind of bullshit, political answer no one enjoys.
Would you like to respond?
I agree with everything the Secretary said, but let me just add this. there is a responsibility on the part of the pharmaceutical industry and the drug companies who are producing all of these drugs and not looking at the consequence of it. And second of all, when we talk about addiction being the disease, the Secretary is right. What that means is we need a revolution in this country in terms of mental health treatment. People should be able to get the treatment that they need when they need it, not 2 months from now, which is why I believe in universal health care with mental health.
We're going to get into all that coming up, but we're going to take a break. We need to take a break, and when we come back, the anger brewing in America.
Oh, Lester.
What did he say?
Talked right over Martin O'Malley.
Talked over him.
He goes 10 seconds, 10 seconds. He goes, I'm, and they just went to.
Well, they got to go to break, and you got to do what you got to do.
And Hannah's like, I will talk over you, Jimmy. Don't even think.
Wait, Martin O'Malley spoke over him?
No,
O'Malley was trying to get at the question.
You got to go to break.
That just is what it is.
Sorry, O'Malley. That's the way it works.
I would say that Lester Holt is annoying me because he keeps stepping on applause lines. It's like, Jesus Christ, it's also, I know it's a debate, but it's also a show. And you see that Bernie Sanders is getting to a point, you feel it. It's not like he's bullshitting around and speaking in platitudes. The guy could not be throwing more fastballs at you, filled with facts and stuff like that news people always pretend that they like. And then you got a guy doing this, and you start cutting him off left and right. So let him get his point out, Lester. There's only 3 of them on the goddamn stage. There's not 80 of them. You don't need to get to anybody else. Bernie's the guy you got to get to, so why don't you let him talk? Oh, it's driving me crazy.
All right. Sounds like you're definitely feeling the burn.
Yes, I am.
Yeah, you're feeling the burn.
And I'm drinking cranberry juice for that.
All right, so a few things. First, that's hilarious. A few things to mention from that last segment of the debate. So, props to O'Malley for being the first and honestly only candidate thus far to touch on climate change and renewable energy. That is definitely something I'm in favor of, and you don't see that at all in Republican debates. You see it a little bit in Democratic debates. He mentioned it. There wasn't a long discussion about it, but hopefully they'll get back to that and talk about it a little more. Also, when it comes to the gun debate, I just want to touch on this whole thing about Bernie Sanders voting against or in favor of immunity for gun manufacturers. I just want you guys to understand what that means from someone who's in favor of gun control. It just means that if there's some sort of accident with a firearm, then the people involved cannot sue that gun manufacturer for that accident, right? And so I don't even know if it really makes sense to be able to sue gun manufacturers. I don't think that gun manufacturers should have complete immunity. I'm against that. But I can see why Bernie would vote against that. That's not something that's going to change my world or change whether or not I support it.
I don't think that's going to save first graders in Connecticut, which everyone wants to call up the most poignant example of gun violence. And I don't think that specific voting, that vote on his record somehow signals that he doesn't care about gun control. He doesn't care about the lives of Americans.
I agree with that. Can I just make one little point about that? It seems like that kind of we're all in favor, I think us here and Bernie and all Democrats are in favor of some kind of gun legislation, but putting something in like that will just bankrupt all the gun companies, and then so that would just create more problems, and they would have to get insurance. I like the idea of making people get private insurance, like you have to get private insurance for a car. So you have to get insurance for your gun. So if anything happens with your gun, then you're liable, right? That's the way I think it should be.
That's an interesting concept. I mean, I think personal responsibility around guns, doesn't impede on the right to bear arms.
I agree. Yeah.
It just means that you really have to take that right seriously, and you have to be willing to jump through some hoops so that you can have your firearm.
It's incredible how doing something like, I don't know, driving a car is considered a privilege, but owning a gun is a right. I mean, we live in this really interesting society where
it's because people intentionally misread the Constitution.
Right.
That's people just feel very strongly and brandish it, of course, and use it as, it's tough because people want to talk about this is a founding principle, and I just think we have to evolve. I mean, it's very simple.
Yeah,
it's just not 1776 anymore.
Yes.
It was a founding principle that blacks are 3/4 of a human being.
Right, you can use, it's just like whenever somebody uses the Bible or whatever it is you want, you can always talk across each other and pull out an example that is completely ridiculous, right?
Yes. So that's why I think that people who are the Second Amendment are for pro-guns, they think that the the Constitution is not a living document. That's what Ted Cruz's original construction is. I'm not. I'm one of those things that is a living document. It does change, which means we can change that. That's a fucking amendment to begin with, the Second Amendment.
All right, we got to go back to the debate. Let's take a look.
Thank you, Lester.
Oh, look, it's Alan Greenspan's wife moderating the Democratic debate. A guy who used to bitch at Alan Greenspan his whole career. Now she's moderating the debate. That seems fair. Super fair.
Secretary Clinton, is it really fair to say that Bernie Sanders wants to kill Obamacare?
Well, Andrea, I am absolutely committed to universal health care. I've worked on this for a long time. People may remember that I took on the health insurance industry back in the 90s, and I didn't quit until we got the Children's Health Insurance Program that insures 8 million kids. And I certainly respect Senator Sanders' intentions. But when you're talking about health care, the details really matter. And therefore, we have been raising questions about the 9 bills that he introduced over 20 years as to how they would work and what would be the impact on people's health care. He didn't like that. His campaign didn't like it either. And tonight he's come out with a new health care plan. And
there
we need to get into the details. But here's what I believe.
Well, how dumb do you think your
Democratic
primary voters
Party
are,
of the
Hillary?
United States worked since Harry Truman to get the Affordable Care Act passed. We finally have a path to universal health care. We've accomplished so much already. I do not want to see the Republicans repeal it, and I don't want to see us start over again with a contentious debate. I want us to defend and build on the Affordable Care Act and improve it.
Secretary Clinton didn't answer your question.
Damn.
Because what her campaign was saying, Bernie Sanders was fought for universal health care for my entire life. He wants to end Medicare, end Medicaid, end the Children's Health Insurance Program. That is nonsense. What a Medicare for All program does is finally provide in this country health care for every man, woman, and child as a right. Now, the truth is that Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Harry Truman, you know what they believed in? They believed that health care should be available to all of our people. I'm on the committee that wrote the Affordable Care Act. I made the Affordable Care Act along with Jim Clyburn a better piece of legislation. I voted for it. But right now what we have to deal with is the fact that 29 million people still have no health insurance. We are paying the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs, getting ripped off. And here's the important point. We are spending far more per person on health care than the people of any other country. My proposal, provide health care to all people, get private insurance out of health insurance, lower the cost of health care for middle-class families by $5,000. That's the vision we need to take.
Well, if I can.
I mean, Hillary Clinton's just banking on that we're stupid about health care.
Yeah.
She's just hoping that she can bullshit us. So fuck you, and I will never vote for you. And if you win the nomination, I'll work against you. I don't care if it's against Trump.
We have the Affordable Care
She's
Act.
making me out to be a chump.
Statement, Jimmy.
Like I'm a chump.
Of
You
the
think we're chumps?
Party and of our country. We've already seen 19 million Americans get insurance. We have seen the end of pre-existing conditions by people from getting insurance. We have seen women no longer paying more for our insurance than men. And we have seen young people up to the age of 26 being able to stay on their parents' policy.
She's just reading out the
There are
positive.
things we
Yeah,
can
yeah.
do.
There's one huge negative, and that negative is being forced to buy private
Pushing
insurance.
our country
That's
back
overpriced.
into
That is ripping us off. There are no cost
I
control.
think is the wrong direction.
I have to talk about something that's actually working in our state.
No one is tearing this up. We're going to go forward. But with the Secretary neglected to mention, not just the 29 million still have no health insurance, that even more are underinsured with huge co-payments and deductibles.
Yes.
Tell me why. We are spending almost 3 times more than the British, who guarantee health care to all of their people. 50% more than the French, more than the Canadians. The vision from FDR and Harry Truman was health care for all people as a right in a cost-effective way. We're not going to tear up the Affordable Care Act. I helped write it, but we are going to move on top of that to a Medicare for all.
Andrea, instead of I think instead of attacking one another on healthcare, we should be talking about the things that are actually working. In our state, we have moved to an all-payer system. With the Affordable Care Act, we now have moved all of our acute care hospitals.
He's super sweet. I like, let's stop fighting. Let's talk about what's working. No. Things are not working right now, especially when it comes to healthcare.
Them based on how well they keep patients out of the hospital, how well they keep their patients. That's the future. Yeah. We need to build on the Affordable Care Act, do the things that work, and reduce costs and increase access.
And that's exactly what we are able to do based on the foundation of the Affordable Care Act. What Governor O'Malley just said is one of the models that we will be looking at to make sure we do get costs down. We do limit a lot of the unnecessary costs that we still have in the system. But with all due respect, to start over again with a whole new debate is something that I think would set us back. The Republicans just voted last week to repeal the Affordable Care Act, and thank goodness President Obama vetoed it and saved Obamacare for the American people.
You talked about Medicare for all, and tonight you released a very detailed plan. Just 2 hours before the debate, you did. But let me ask you about Vermont, because in Vermont, you tried in the state of Vermont, and Vermont walked away from this kind of idea of Medicare for all, single payer, because they concluded it would require major tax increases, and by some estimates, it would double the budget. If you couldn't sell it in Vermont, Senator,
you might want to ask the governor of the state of Vermont why he could not do it. I'm not the governor. I'm the senator from the state of Vermont. But second of all, here is what the real point is. In terms of all of the issues you've raised, the good questions you've raised, you know what it all comes down to? Do you know why we can't do what every other major country on earth is doing? It's because we have a campaign finance system that is corrupt. We have super PACs. We have the pharmaceutical industry pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into campaign contributions and lobbying, and the private insurance companies as well. What this is really about is not the rational way to go forward. It's Medicare for all. It is whether we have the guts to stand up to the private insurance companies and all of their money and the pharmaceuticals. That's what they're
doing. And you know what's great about what he's doing right now? He's fucking folksy right now. Yeah, he is real folksy, and that shit works. Yeah, especially in South Carolina.
The health insurance industry that's spent, many millions of dollars attacking me, and probably will so again because of what I believe we can do, building on the Affordable Care Act. I think it's important to point out that there are a lot of reasons we have the healthcare system we have today. I know how much money influences the political decision making. That's why I'm for huge campaign finance reform. No. However, we started that had private health insurance. And even during the Affordable Care Act debate, there was an opportunity to vote for what was called the public option. In other words, people could buy into Medicare. And even when the Democrats were in charge of the Congress, we couldn't get the votes for that. So what I'm saying is really simple. This has been the fight of the Democratic Party for decades. We have the Affordable Care Act. Let's make it work. Let's take the models that states are doing. We now have driven costs down to the lowest they've been in 50 years. Now we've got to get individual costs down. That's what I'm planning to do.
That's time. We're going to take a turn now. Secretary Clinton, in his final State of the Union address, President Obama said his biggest regret was his inability to bring the country together. If President Obama couldn't do it, how will you?
Great question.
Well, I think it's an important point the President made in his State of the Union. And here's what I would say. I will go anywhere to meet with anyone at any time to find common ground. That's what I did as a First Lady when I worked with both Democrats and Republicans to get the Children's Health Insurance Program. When I worked with Tom DeLay, one of the most partisan of Republicans, to reform the adoption and foster care system. What I did working in the Senate, where I crossed the aisle often, working even with the senator from South Carolina, Lindsey Graham.
I'd like you to cross the aisle back to the Democratic side at some point in your fucking career.
And it's what I did as Secretary of State on numerous occasions, and most particularly rounding up 2/3 votes in order to pass a treaty that lowered the nuclear weapons in both Russia and the United States.
I've been tagging all my
so I know it's hard. But I also know you
I thought you were
look at
trying to
it
be
every
ironic or
single
something.
day. I look out here. I see a lot of my friends from the Congress, and I know that they work at it every single day. Because maybe you can only find a little sliver of common ground to cooperate with somebody from the other party. But who knows? If you're successful there, maybe you can build even more. And that's what I would do.
Sanders' response?
A couple of years ago, when we understood that veterans were not getting the quality care they needed in a timely manner, I worked with folks like John McCain and others to pass the most comprehensive veterans healthcare legislation in modern history. But let me rephrase your question, because I think...
Let me rephrase your question. Good for you.
In all due respect, you're missing the main point.
Good for you.
The main point in the Congress is not that Republicans and Democrats hate each other. That's a mythology from the media.
Bam!
The real issue is that Congress is owned
Yes!
big money and
Yes!
refuses to do what the American people want them to do.
Yes!
The
Say
real
it!
issue is that
Tell it!
the real issue is that in area after area, raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, the American people want it. Rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure, creating 13 million jobs, the American people want it. Pay equity for women, the American people want it. Demanding that the wealthy start paying their fair share of taxes, the American people want it.
That's time. And let me continue.
Fuck you, Lester. Shut up!
To the needs of the people, not big money.
Senator Sanders, let me continue. You call yourself a democratic socialist, and throughout your career in politics, you've been critical
I do.
of the
Good for you.
What did he say?
saying in a book you wrote,
you call yourself a
there wasn't a
democratic
hell of a big
socialist? I do.
difference between the two major parties.
He's super
How will you win a
feisty.
general? How will you win a general election labeling yourself a democratic socialist?
Kicking ass.
What I believe and what I was just saying, the Democratic Party needs major reform. To those of you in South Carolina, you know what, in Mississippi, we need a 50-state strategy so that people in South Carolina and Mississippi can get the resources that they need. Instead of being dependent on super PACs, what we need is to be dependent on small individual campaign contributors. We need an agenda that speaks to the needs of working families and low-income people, not wealthy campaign contributors.
Yeah, but Senator, you can
expand. We need to expand what the input into the Democratic Party. I am very proud that in this campaign, we have seen an enormous amount of excitement from young people, from working people. We have received more individual contributions than any candidate in the history of this country up to this point.
Yeah, but Senator, you never came to campaign for Vincent Shaheen when he was running for governor. In fact, neither of you came to campaign for Vincent Shaheen when he was running for governor. We can talk on and on about wanting to build a stronger Democratic Party, but Lester, the question you answered, there's no laughing matter. The most recurring question I get when I stand on the chair all across Iowa and talk with my neighbors is, how are you going to heal the divisions and the wounds in our country? This is the biggest challenge. Can you answer that with an anecdote, please? I'm ready for a story. People together over deep divides and very old wounds, and that's
I met someone when I was in Maryland,
cannot keep talking past each other, declaring all Republicans are our enemies, or the war is all about being against millionaires or billionaires, or it's all against American Muslims or all against immigrants. Look, as Frederick Douglass said, we are one. Our cause is one, and we must help each other if we're going to succeed.
What is that? Nothing.
I literally feel like you just gave a speech at like a third grade graduation.
And that is, you are right. All of us have denounced Trump's attempt to divide this country, the anti-Latino rhetoric, the racist rhetoric, the anti-Muslim rhetoric. But where I disagree with you, Governor O'Malley, is I do believe we have to deal with the fundamental issues of a handful of billionaires.
I agree with
who
that.
control the economic and political life of this country.
I agree.
Nothing real will get happen unless we have a political revolution where millions of people finally stand up.
We're going to get into that coming up. But Secretary Clinton, here's another question from YouTube. It's from a young video blogger who has over 5 million subscribers.
You're like,
It's a question about...
this job will get a lot more interested. Yeah. We get a revolution going.
I'm Connor Franza. I'm 23, and my audience is the same age. Getting my generation's vote should be a priority for any presidential candidate. Now, I know Senator Sanders is pretty popular among my peers, but what I want to know is how are all of you planning on engaging us further in this election?
Secretary Clinton.
thanks for the question, and congratulations on 5 million viewers on YouTube.
Oh, there she goes.
Look,
the
this
$1.3
election
trillion
is
in student loan debt.
mostly
I'll
about
start there.
the future, and therefore it is of greatest urgency for young people. I've laid out my ideas about what we can do to make college affordable, how we can help people pay off their student debts and save thousands of dollars, how we can create more good jobs, because a lot of the young people that I talk with are pretty disappointed about the economic prospects they feel they're facing. So making community college free, making it possible to attend a public college or university with debt-free tuition, looking for ways to protect our rights, especially from the concerted Republican assault on voting rights, on women's rights, on gay rights, on civil rights, on workers' rights. And I know how much young people value their independence, their autonomy, and their rights. So I think this is an election where we have to pull young people and older people together to have a strategy about how we're going to encourage even more Americans to vote, because it is absolutely clear to me that turning over our White House to the Republicans would be bad for everybody, especially young people.
A quick follow-up, a 30-second follow-up. Why is Senator Sanders beating you 2-1 among younger voters?
Look, I have the greatest respect for Senator Sanders and for his supporters, and I'm going to keep working as hard as I can to reach people of all ages about what I will do, what the experience, the ideas that I have that I will bring to the White House, and I hope to have their support when I'm the Democratic nominee.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, full business and the differences among the three candidates on the American economy. We'll be right back.
So my tweet was, how dumb does Hillary Clinton think Democratic primary voters are when it comes to health care? I mean, if there's any group of people in America who know anything about the health care debate, it would be those people,
it's
right?
True. No, they're completely engaged and invested in it.
So not only, what she's doing is insulting, and she's trying to people who know better, and she's bullshitting people who don't. So it's the opposite of what a Democrat is supposed to do, especially in the primary, and it's why people hated her when she did this stuff to Barack Obama. There's a videotape of her castigating Barack Obama, saying, since when did Democrats attack other Democrats for advocating for universal health care? And now she's doing the exact same thing, which reveals her to not have a center. She's just a politician. It reveals that she doesn't have a reason for wanting to be president. Bernie Sanders can't help but tell you why he wants to be president.
So just to jump in very quickly, she keeps making this point that a lot of Democrats make about the Affordable Care Act. Look, it's not everything that we wanted, but it's a start, and we're going to build from that. They keep saying that. But when did we pass the Affordable Care Act? It was during Obama's first term.
Yes.
And what have the Democrats done to increase coverage, to do something about cost control?
No, they're skating off of the initial legislation, and they're not willing to dig in on it. I think what was so awesome was to watch Bernie break it down excessively, which is what I really wanted to see.
Yes.
He's feisty, he's folksy. I think that's going to play really well, especially in South Cackalack. And I'm really excited to watch him respond with such animation around it.
Yeah.
But it's lucid.
Yes, thank you. That's, I think, the key word, because he doesn't come off as someone who's getting angry or defensive. He comes off as someone who knows what the reality is. He wants to tell you, in a very calm but also passionate way, what the details are of his health insurance plan or health care plan, and how different it is from Hillary. And he also called her out on her hypocrisy when it comes to universal health insurance. I don't know why all of a sudden she's changing her tune.
Why does she think this will help her, Anna? Because the people who she's trying to appeal to know better.
I think what she's planning on doing, honestly, is what Michael touched on before the debate started. She's trying to focus on how she's more electable than Bernie Sanders is, even against Donald Trump. And so right now she's trying to kind of skate through all the other policy issues. So she's lying to the Democrats about what she would do with health insurance and what she's done in the past when it comes to health care. But she's probably hoping, like, whatever, let's just skate through this gate.
She's being evasive.
And let me just prove that I'm more electable. And as long as I can do that, Democrats are going to get scared because they don't want a Trump, as the next president of the United States. So if I can prove that I'm more electable than Bernie Sanders is, that's all that matters.
So that's what people, I think, didn't like about her the first time she ran against Barack Obama was she played the fear card, which we were so sick of 8 years of George Bush and Dick Cheney playing the fear card. And then she tried to fear us. Remember the 3 a.m. phone call and all that stuff? It was fear, 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 terrorism, scary, scary fear. And now she's doing the same thing. She's trying to scare us about Trump, about him taking away your Medicare and your health care, which is all just fear-mongering, which is the opposite of how Democrats are supposed to campaign.
Well, that's what's so great about watching Bernie is that he invigorates you. It's not about fear. He's like, we need to have the guts to stand up to money in politics, the health insurance companies, big farm, whatever it is. He's asking the people to get on board. You know what I mean? He's building a movement, and that is so much more inviting and engaging than basically talking shit about the Republicans or just saying, hey, listen, I'm the person that's gonna probably be able to beat Trump.
So
the easiest.
So here's where I'm not satisfied with any of the candidates. The question about drugs. Okay, so very quickly, I mean, Hillary Clinton didn't even address why we're having issues with heroin addictions in the country. It does have to do with pharmaceutical companies. I'm glad that Bernie touched on that. But we need to legalize and regulate drugs so people can smoke marijuana instead of take these opioids that are highly addictive and terrible for your health.
And drug addicts aren't thrown in jail.
Exactly.
He says it's okay to take millions from big banks and tell them what to do. My plan, break up the big banks, close the tax loopholes, and make them pay their fair share. What do you see as the difference between what you would do about the banks and what Secretary Clinton would do?
First,
this is good.
I don't make money from the banks. I don't get personal speaking fees from Goldman Sachs.
Ah, good for you.
What I would do. What I would do.
So you should
understand.
I know. What is that?
That when you have 3 out of the 4 largest banks today bigger than they were when we bailed them out because they were too big to fail. When you have the 6 largest financial institutions having assets of 60% of the GDP of America, it is very clear to me what you have to do. You got to bring back a 21st century Glass-Steagall legislation, and you got to break up these huge financial institutions. They have too much economic power, and they have too much financial power over our entire economy.
Yes, they do.
Teddy Roosevelt were alive today, the old Republican trustbuster. What he would say is, these guys are too powerful, break them up. I believe that's what the American people want to see. That's my view.
Secretary Clinton, help the voter understand the daylight between the two of you here.
Well, there's no daylight on the basic premise that there should be no bank too big to fail and no individual too powerful to jail. We agree on that. But where we disagree is the comments that Senator Sanders has made that don't just affect me, I can take that, but he's criticized President Obama for taking donations from Wall Street.
Okay, good.
And President Obama has led our country out of the Great Recession. Senator Sanders called him weak, disappointing. He even in 2011 publicly sought someone to run in a primary against President Obama. Now, I personally believe that President Obama's work to push through the Dodd-Frank bill,
this is good video
and then to sign it, was one of the most important regulatory schemes we've had since the 1930s. So I'm going to defend Dodd-Frank, and I'm going to defend President Obama for taking on Wall Street, taking on the financial.
He did not take on any of those.
He really
didn't. Again, who do you think you're talking to?
In 2006, when I ran for the Senate, Senator Barack Obama was kind enough to campaign for me. 2008, I did my best to see that he was elected. And in 2012, I worked as hard as I could to see that he was reelected. He and I are friends. We work together on many issues. We have some differences of opinion. But here is the issue. Secretary touched on it. Can you really reform Wall Street when they are spending millions and millions of dollars on campaign contributions, and when they are providing speaker fees to individuals. So it's easy to say, well, I'm going to do this and do that. But I have doubts when people receive huge amounts of money from Wall Street. I am very proud. I do not have a super PAC. I do not want Wall Street's money. I'll rely on the middle class and working families.
Time. I have a question for you.
You know, I think since Senator Sanders followed up on this, your profusion of comments about your feelings toward President Obama are a little strange given what you said about him in 2011. But look, I have a plan that most commentators have said is tougher, more effective, and more comprehensive.
That's not
It builds on the Dodd-Frank. Yes, it is. It builds on the Dodd-Frank regulatory scheme, but it goes much further. Because both the governor and the senator have focused only on the big banks. Lehman Brothers, AIG, the shadow banking sector were as big a problem in what caused the Great Recession. I go after them, and I can tell you that the hedge fund billionaires who are running ads against me right now, and Karl Rove, who started running an ad against me right now, funded by money from the financial services sector, sure thing. I'm the one they don't want to be up.
Yeah. I mean, in 2007, she went to NASDAQ and told them, you guys better stop that.
Yeah, she's right.
Yeah, they're really afraid of her.
Yeah, what Secretary Clinton just said is actually not true. What? I have put forward a plan that would actually put cops back on the beat of Wall Street. I have put forward a plan that was heralded as very comprehensive and realistic. Look, if a bank robber robs a bank and all you do is slap him on the wrist, he's just going to keep robbing banks again. The same thing is true with people in suits. Secretary Clinton, I have a tremendous amount of respect for you. But for you to say there's no daylight on this between the three of us is also not true. I support reinstituting a modern version of Glass-Steagall that would include going after the shadow banks, requiring capital requirements that would force them to no longer put us on the hook for these sorts of things. In prior debates, I've heard you even bring up, you bring up President Obama here in South Carolina in defense of the fact of your cozy relationship with Wall Street. In an earlier debate, I heard you bring up even the 9/11 victims to defend it. The truth of the matter is, Secretary Clinton, you do not go as far as reining in Wall Street as I would. And the fact of the matter is the people of America deserve to have a president that's on their side, protecting the Main Street economy from excesses on Wall Street, and we're just as vulnerable today.
30-second response.
Yes, well, first of all, Paul Krugman, Barney Frank, others have all endorsed my plan. Secondly, we have Dodd-Frank. It gives us the authority already to break up big banks that pose a risk to the financial sector. I want to go further and add to that. And, Governor, you have raised money on Wall Street. You raised a lot of money.
Come on, we're all whores.
You were the head of the
Come on, you guys.
And you were...
Somebody please, go on to MartinO'Malley.com. Go on to MartinO'Malley.com. Send me your checks. It's zero.
Listen.
Yeah, the point is that if we're going to be serious about this and not just try to score political points, we should know what's in Dodd-Frank. And what's in Dodd-Frank already gives the president...
Dodd-Frank was weak sauce. Can we not talk about Dodd-Frank as if it was relevant in any way? It did nothing. It did nothing to the big banks.
Goldman Sachs recently fined $5 billion. Goldman Sachs has given this country 2 secretaries of Treasury, one on the Republicans, one on the Democrats.
Revolving door of politics.
Goldman Sachs is a billionaire who comes to Congress and tells us we should cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid.
Yep.
Secretary Clinton, and you're not the only one, so I don't mean to just point the finger at you. You've received over $600,000 in speaking fees from Goldman Sachs in 1 year.
Yep.
I find it very strange that a major financial institution that pays $5 billion in fines for breaking the law, not one of their executives is prosecuted, while kids who smoke marijuana get a jail sentence.
Senator Sanders, you're the only one on this stage that voted to deregulate the financial market in 2000, to take the cops off the street, to use Governor O'Malley's phrase, to make the SEC and the Commodities Futures Trading Commission no longer able to regulate swaps and derivatives, which were one of the main cause of the collapse in 08. So there's plenty of problems that we all have to face together. And the final thing I would say, we're at least having a vigorous debate about reining in Wall Street. The Republicans want to give them more power and repeal Dodd-Frank. That's what we need to stop.
Anyone who wants to check my record, anyone who wants to check my record in taking on Wall Street, in fighting against the deregulation of Wall Street, when Wall Street put billions of dollars in lobbying and campaign contributions to get the government off their backs. They got the government off their backs. Turns out that they were crooks and they destroyed our economy. I think it's time to put the government back on their backs.
Senator Sanders?
Yes.
Senator Sanders, we've talked a lot about things you want to do. You want free education for everyone. You want the federal minimum wage raised to $15 an hour. You want to expand Social Security benefits.
Use that now in the general
Be specific about what you want. But let's talk about how to pay for all this. You now said that you would raise taxes today, 2 hours or so ago. You've said you would raise taxes to pay for your health care plan. You haven't been specific about how to pay for the other things. Will you tell us tonight?
Good. You're right. I want to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure, create 13 million jobs. We do that by doing away with the absurd loophole that now allows major profitable corporations to stash their money in the Cayman Islands and not in some years pay a nickel in taxes. Yes, I do. I plead guilty. I want every kid in this country who has the ability to be able to go to a public college or university tuition free. And by the way, I want to substantially lower student debt interest rates in this country as well. How do I pay for it? I pay for it through a tax on Wall Street speculation. This country and the middle class bailed out Wall Street. Now it is Wall Street's time to help the middle class. In fact, we have documented, unlike Secretary Clinton, I have documented exactly how I would pay for our ambitious agenda.
Secretary Clinton, he mentioned so Secretary Clinton, you want to respond?
Well, I have actually documented every way that I'm going to pay for what I'm doing because I think the American public deserves to know, and you can go to my website and actually see that. But there are serious questions about how we're going to pay for what we want to see our country do. And I'm the only candidate standing here tonight who has said, I will not raise taxes on the middle class. I want to raise incomes, not taxes. And I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that the wealthy pay for debt-free tuition, for child care, for paid family leave, to help us bring down student debt. We're going to refinance that student debt, saving kids thousands of dollars. Yeah, and that will also come out of some of the pockets of people in the financial services industry. But I will tell you exactly how I pay for everything I propose.
Senator Sanders, let me ask you a question about taxes, because the most Googled political issue in the last month was taxes. Now, in your health care plan, the plan you released tonight, you would not only raise taxes on the wealthy, the details you released indicate you would raise taxes on the middle class also. Is that correct?
What is correct, and I'm disappointed that Secretary Clinton's campaign has made this criticism. It's a Republican criticism. Secretary Clinton does know a lot about health care. And she understands, I believe, that a Medicare for All single-payer program will substantially lower the cost of health care for middle-class families. So what we have got to acknowledge, and I hope the Secretary does, is we are doing away with private health insurance premiums. So instead of paying $10,000 to Blue Cross or Blue Shield, yes, some middle-class families would be paying slightly more in taxes, but the result would be that middle-class family would be saving some $5,000 in health care costs. A little bit more in taxes, do away with private health insurance premiums. It's a pretty good deal.
Senator, let me just follow up on that, because on Meet the Press on December 20th, you said that you would only raise taxes on the middle class to pay for family leave. And having said that, now you say you're going to raise middle-class taxes to pay for health care as well. Is that breaking your word?
No, it is not breaking my word. When you are, it's one thing to say I'm raising taxes, it's another thing to say that we are doing away with private health insurance premiums. So if I save you $10,000 in private health insurance and you pay a little bit more in taxes, in total, there are huge savings in what your family is spending.
Senator, I'm the only person on this stage that's actually balanced the budget every year for 15 years.
I was mayor for 8 years, I did that as well.
Okay, so that was...
I did that as well.
Okay.
You're gonna get the gun, the trigger finger from Bernie.
We invested more in infrastructure, more in transportation. We made our public schools #1 in America 5 years in a row, and went 4 years in a row without a penny's increase to college tuition. The things that we need to do in our country, like debt-free college in the next 5 years, like making national service a universal option in order to cut youth unemployment in half in the next 3 years. All of these things can be done if we eliminate one entitlement we can no longer afford as a nation. And that is the entitlement that the super wealthy among us, those making more than $1 million, feel that they are entitled to paying a much lower marginal tax rate than was usual for the better part of these 80 years. And if we tax earnings from investments on money, namely capital gains, at the same rate as we tax earnings from sweat and hard work and toil, we can make the investments we need to make our country better.
We've got a lot of ground to cover here. Many Democratic voters are passionate about the need to do something to combat the threat of climate change, including the team of scientists from YouTube's Minute Earth channel.
Yeah, excited about that.
Hello from Minute Earth. Fossil fuels have long kept our cars moving and our light bulbs lit. But we now know that burning these fuels releases heat-trapping gases that are warming the planet, causing seas to rise and contributing to extreme weather events like South Carolina's devastating flooding last year. Fighting human-caused climate change means giving up our global addiction to fossil fuels and shifting the bulk of the world's energy supply to alternative sources. Some countries have acted decisively to make this transition, but here at home, we still get a whopping 82% of our energy from coal, oil, and natural gas. In the U.S., political gridlock, pressure from industry lobbyists, and insufficient R&D have made an already tough battle against climate change even tougher.
Mr. Sanders, Americans love their SUVs, which spiked in sales last year as gas prices plummeted. How do you convince Americans that the problem of climate change is so urgent that they need to change their behavior?
I think we already are. Younger generation understands it instinctively. I was home in Burlington, Vermont on Christmas Eve. The temperature was 65 degrees. People in Vermont know what's going on. People who did ice fishing where their ice is no longer there on the lake understand what's going on. I'm on both the environmental and energy committees. The debate is over. Climate change is real. It is already causing major problems. And if we do not act boldly and decisively, a bad situation will become worse. It is amazing to me, and I think we'll have agreement on this up here, that we have a major party called the Republican Party that is so owned by the fossil fuel industry and their campaign contributions that they don't even have the courage, the decency to listen to the scientists. It is beyond my comprehension how we can elect the President of the United States, somebody like Trump, who believes that climate change is a hoax invented by the Chinese. Bottom line is, we need to be bold and decisive. We can create millions of jobs. We must, for the sake of our kids and grandchildren, transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. I've got the most comprehensive legislation in the Senate to do that, and as president, I will fight to make that happen.
O'Malley, 30 seconds, sir.
Thank you. Lester, on this stage tonight, this
Governor O'Malley, you wish you weren't here. Just
where we actually believe in science, I would like to challenge and invite my colleagues here on this stage to join me in putting forward a plan to move us to a 100% clean electric energy grid by 2050. It can be done with solar, with wind, with new technologies, with green buildings. This can happen, but President Obama made us more energy independent. But then all of the above strategy didn't land us on the moon. We need American ingenuity, and we need to reach this goal by 2050 for the sake of our kids.
We're going to take a break. When we return, the late-breaking developments regarding Iran, the threat of crisis now more real than ever on U.S. soil. Americans in fear.
Okay, so this is really hard for me to take. Hillary Clinton, I have the same physical reaction to her as I used to have when George Bush would speak. And that's not good for her, right? So that's what we've been saying.
Yeah, well, it's not good for us sitting near you either.
You're getting heated.
So, again, you see why, in a general election, why Bernie Sanders polls way ahead of Hillary Clinton at a time when people on both sides of the aisle are sick and tired of career politicians and people sounding like Washington insiders who are bought and paid for, which is what Hillary Clinton is, just by those speeches that she's given this year, over $600,000 this year from banks on Wall Street. You think she's going to go in and then stick it to them? No. So she's everything. She's like a Republican on that stage right now, and it's a good contrast between her and Hillary. The thing I don't understand is who the hell does Hillary think is watching this debate? Who does she think she's bullshitting?
She thinks that no one's watching this debate, and she's probably accurate.
Yeah,
right?
But someone is watching, and they would mean even the people who are left watching are the most interested people.
Yeah,
the most engaged, the most who would know she's full of shit.
Yes. Okay, so I think the strongest moment for Bernie, at least for me personally, I'm obviously biased, so there are some issues that I care about more than others. The regulation of the financial industry, of the banks, is what I care about the most, along with healthcare, along with our justice system. And in all three categories, I think Bernie really outshined Hillary. Now, the financial stuff was really interesting because I think Bernie did the best in that regard. So I love that he talked about Dodd-Frank and how it's just a watered-down regulation that actually went after a lot of the smaller banks, making the bigger banks even more successful, even more powerful, even more too big to fail.
Right. Well, the rallying cry, break up the banks, is simple and to the point. And again, I think it's very important when it comes to this sort of, when you get into the financial mumbo jumbo, everybody goes to sleep unless it's The Big Short, which everyone please go see.
Such a good movie.
Go see The Big Short because that's, I mean, again, they're trying to make an argument that everyone can understand. Break up the big banks, I get that,
Yes. Okay, so the thing that really led to our economic decline back in 2008 was the subprime mortgages. And The Big Short touches on that. Definitely watch that movie. It was excellent. Look, I know because I'm in the middle of trying to figure out when's the best time to buy a home, right? So I'm doing my research on this. And subprime mortgages are still being handed out by these big banks.
I just read that.
Guess what? I'm sitting back and I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to keep renting until this bubble bursts again, and then I'll be a cash buyer. Because I guarantee you the housing market will collapse again because there's no regulation preventing what happened in the past from happening again. It will happen again. I guarantee it.
In fact, they say that housing prices are up to 2004 levels again.
Oh, it's out of control.
Past 50% from 2010. They've gone up in places like Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York, Washington, D.C. I just read this article today. It's going crazy. And I'm like, oh my God, it's happening again. I'm like, should we sell our house now and we start renting again? Because it seems like it's going to crash pretty quickly.
People need to be pissed off. And I hope they watch and listen to Bernie and they feel the burn and they decide to do something about it.
Exactly.
Michael Stewart changed his tie.
All right, let's go to Jake Tapper and see what he's got to say.
I'm sorry.
The things that President Obama did, wrapping herself, President Obama. Let's go back downstairs and check in with our moderator,
We're going to check in
and Andrea. So, what's
Did they take a break?
guys?
We're having a break right now.
Okay, so the break.
Ready.
So they're going back. You can turn them down.
All right, we can turn this down. We'll go back to it as soon as they start.
I think a big mistake that Bernie made. Again, it's not your ideas; it's how you present your ideas, and you got to make sure you don't hand on a platter a commercial to whoever the Republican nominee is, and he did that right now. He said, I think we need to get the government back on their backs, which is the worst way to say something like that.
Well, the mental image is
want the government back on your back? No, what you want is sensible regulation so they can't crash our economy. We need to put these criminals in jail. You don't say I need the government on your back, you businessman. That's the worst way to say it, and he said it that way. Can you see? Another line they're going to cut into an attack ad is when he goes, sure, you're going to have to pay a little more in taxes. Boom, boom. Get government back on their back. They're getting it all from one debate.
It's easy to take that statement out of context. And of course, he elaborated on what he meant by that. You as the middle class are actually going to end up saving a lot more money. But when it comes to health care, you're going to pay a little more in taxes, but you're going to save a lot more in health care. And by the way, in terms of taxing people, he's going after those making the most money. He wants their effective tax rate to be about 50%, which is high, but remember, it's not even close as high as it was under the Reagan administration, right?
Yes, correct. But you do agree that he said that in a bad way. When someone tries to bait you into saying, "I'm going to raise taxes," you don't say it.
That's
you
true,
say what he should have said was.
It is the lowest common denominator in political.
You just don't do it. But what he needs to do is he needs to say, "No, my plan actually cuts the money for people. We're going to save people money," which it does. Yeah. No, it saves people.
But he's just too honest. You know, I mean, he doesn't pussyfoot around shit. He just says things, even when like they might be hard to. You know, I think that is what is refreshing, and you know what, his authenticity really does come through.
Yes. It does,
and I think that matters, and I do think it resonates.
I completely agree with you, and you can see that in the audience. Another thing that he could have done, Jimmy, is instead of saying, yes, I would raise taxes on the middle class, is I would turn it around and be like, I would actually do something that your husband did when he was in office. I would raise taxes on the wealthiest people in this country so we can have a surplus in this country. You don't agree with your husband's policy when it comes to taxes? That's the way I would hit back.
You're right. Yeah, that's this. We have smarter ways. The problem, we love Bernie's authenticity, is that it doesn't hurt to couch your message in a way that will land the hardest, right? I mean, you know, that's the thing I learned about as being a comedian. Words matter, and the littlest change can make the biggest difference as far as landing your message, and that's what he wants to do. So what you want to do is you want to create an environment where your message lands with people.
Iran is getting its billions of dollars. Several Americans who had been held are now going to be heading home. The president said today it's a good day for diplomacy. It's a time now to restore diplomatic relations for the first time since 1979 and actually reopen the U.S. Embassy in Tehran.
I think what we have got to do is move as aggressively as we can to normalize relations with Iran, understanding that Iran's behavior in so many ways is something that we disagree with. Their support for terrorism, the anti-American rhetoric that we're hearing from some of their leadership is something that is not acceptable. On the other hand, the fact that we managed to reach an agreement, something that I very strongly supported, that prevents Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, and that we did that without going to war, and that I believe we're seeing a thaw in our relationships with Iran is a very positive step. So if your question is, do I want to see that relationship become more positive in the future? Yes. Can I tell you that we should open an embassy in Tehran tomorrow? No, I don't think we should. But I think the goal has got to be, as we have done with Cuba, to move and warm relations with a very powerful and important country in this world.
Your response, Secretary Clinton.
Well, I'm very proud of the Iran nuclear agreement. I was very pleased to be part of what the president put into action when he took office. I was responsible for getting those sanctions imposed, which put the pressure on Iran that brought them to the negotiating table, which resulted in this agreement. And so they have been, so far, following their requirements under the agreement. But I think we still have to carefully watch them. We've had one good day over 36 years, and I think we need more good days before we move more rapidly toward any kind of normalization. And we have to be sure that they are truly going to implement the agreement, and then we have to go after them on a lot of their other bad behavior in the region, which is causing enormous problems in Syria, Yemen, Iraq, and elsewhere.
Well, you mentioned Syria. Let me ask you about Syria, all of you. Let's turn to Syria, the civil war that has been raging there. Are there any circumstances in which you could see deploying significant numbers of ground forces in Syria? Not just special forces, special operators, but significant ground forces to combat ISIS in direct combat.
But I know everybody policy.
Absolutely not. I have a three-point plan that does not include American ground forces. It includes the United States leading an air coalition, which is what we are doing, supporting fighters on the ground. The Iraqi army has beginning to show more ability.
Ultimately, that
the Sunni fighters that we are now helping to reconstitute, and Kurdish fighters on both sides of the border. I think we also have to try to disrupt their supply chain of foreign fighters and foreign money, and we do have to contest them in online space. So I'm very committed to both going after ISIS, but also supporting what Secretary Kerry is doing to try to move on a political, diplomatic course to try to begin to slow down and hopefully end the carnage in Syria. So many of the problems that we see in the region and beyond.
Senator Sanders, ground forces, yes or no?
As everybody knows, this is an incredibly complicated and difficult issue, and I applaud. I know President Obama's been getting a lot of criticism on this. I think he is doing the right thing. What the nightmare is, which many of my Republican colleagues appear to want, is to not have learned the lesson of Iraq. To get American young men and women involved in perpetual warfare in the quagmire of Syria and the Middle East would be an unmitigated disaster that, as president, I will do everything in my power to avoid. We should learn from King Abdullah of Jordan, one of the few heroes in a very unheroic place. And what Abdullah said is this is a war for the soul of Islam, and that Muslim troops should be on the ground with our support and the support of other major countries. That is how we destroy ISIS, not with American troops in perpetual warfare.
Governor O'Malley.
Thank you. Andrea, governors have led us to victory in 2 world wars by doing what America does best, and that is by joining forces with others, by acting in coalition. And I believe that President Obama is doing the right thing in this case. We need to learn the lessons from the past. We do need to provide the special ops advisors. We do need to provide the technical support. But over the long term, we need to develop new alliances. We need a much more proactive national security strategy that reduces these threats before they rise to a level where it feels like we need to pull for a division of Marines. And I also want to add one other thing here. I appreciate the fact that in our debate, we don't use the term you hear Republicans throwing around, trying to look all bravado and macho, sending other kids into combat. They keep using the term boots on the ground. A woman in Burlington, Iowa said, Governor, when you're with your colleagues, please serve 2 tours of duty in Iraq as a
I agree with him. The boots on the ground BS when they would never put their kids boots on any ground.
I have a question for Senator Sanders. Did the policies of the Obama administration, in which Secretary Clinton, of course, was a part, create a vacuum in Iraq and Syria that helped ISIS grow?
No, I think the vacuum was created by the disastrous war in Iraq, which I vigorously opposed. Not only did I vote against it, I helped lead the opposition. And what happened there is, it's easy to get rid of a 2-bit dictator like Saddam Hussein, but there wasn't the kind of thought as to what happens the day after you get him, and what kind of political vacuum occurs, and who rises up. Groups like ISIS. So I think that President Obama made a promise to the American people when he ran. And he said, you know what, I'm going to do my best to bring American troops home. And I supported what he did. Our job is to train and provide military support for Muslim countries in the area who are prepared to take on ISIS. And one point I want to make here that is not made very often. You have incredibly wealthy countries in that region. Countries like Saudi Arabia, countries like Qatar. Qatar happens to be the largest, wealthiest country per capita in the world. They have got to start putting in some skin in the game and not just ask the United States to do it.
Secretary Clinton, I want to talk to you about red lines because former Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel said in a recent interview that President Obama's decision to stand down on planned missile strikes against Damascus after Assad had used chemical weapons hurt the president's credibility. Should the president have stuck to his red line once he drew it?
Look, I think that the president's decision to go after the chemical weapons, once there was a potential opportunity to build on when the Russians opened that door, resulted in a very positive outcome. We were able to get the chemical weapons out. I know from my own experience as Secretary of State that we were deeply worried about Assad's forces using chemical weapons because it would have had not only a horrific effect on people in Syria, but it could very well have affected the surrounding states, Jordan, Israel, Lebanon, Turkey. So getting those chemical weapons out was a big deal.
Should he have stuck to his line? Did it hurt U.S. credibility?
I think as commander-in-chief, you've got to constantly be evaluating the decisions you have to make. I know a little bit about this, having spent many hours in the Situation Room advising President Obama. And I want to just add to something that Senator Sanders said. The United States had a very big interest in trying to help stabilize the region. If there is any blame to be spread around, it starts with the Prime Minister of Iraq, who sectarianized his military, setting Shia against Sunni. It is amplified by Assad, who has waged one of the bloodiest, most terrible attacks on his own people, 250,000 plus dead, millions fleeing, causing this vacuum that has been filled, unfortunately, by terrorist groups, including ISIS. So I think we are in the midst of great turmoil in this region. We have a proxy conflict going on between Saudi Arabia and Iran. You know, one of the criticisms I've had of Senator Sanders is his suggestion that, you know, Iranian troops be used to try to end the war in Syria and go after ISIS, which I don't think would be a good idea. But overall, a lot of the forces at work in the region are ones that we cannot directly influence, but we can try to bring more help to the
Senator Sanders. Where Secretary Clinton and I think, I agree with most of what she said, but where I think we do have an honest disagreement is that in the incredible quagmire of Syria, where it's hard to know who's fighting who, and if you give arms to this guy, it may end up in ISIS's hands the next day. We all know that. And we all know, no argument. The Secretary is absolutely right. Assad is a butcher of his own people, man using chemical weapons against his own people. This is beyond disgusting. But I think in terms of our priorities in the region, our first priority must be the destruction of ISIS. Our second priority must be getting rid of Assad through some political settlement, working with Iran, working with Russia. But the immediate task is to bring all interests together who want to destroy ISIS, including Russia, including Iran, including our Muslim allies, to make that the major priority.
But in all of that, Senator and Secretary, I think we're leaving out something very important here. And that is that we still don't have the human intelligence, overt in terms of diplomatic intelligence, or covert, to understand even what the heck happens as the secondary and tertiary effects of some of these things. We are walking through this region, Andrea, without the human intelligence that we need. And we need to make a renewed investment as a country in bringing up a new generation of foreign service officers and bringing up a new generation of business people and in actually understanding and having relationships in these places so we have a better sense of what the heck happens after a dictator topples and can take action to prevent another safe haven and another iteration of terror.
Time is up.
Yes, Senator Sanders mentioned Russia a moment ago. Secretary Clinton, you famously handed Russia's foreign minister a reset button in 2009. Since then, Russia has annexed Crimea, fomented a war in Ukraine, provided weapons that downed an airliner, and launched operations, as we just discussed, to support Assad in Syria. As president, would you hand Vladimir Putin a reset button?
Well, it depended upon what I got for it. And I can tell you what we got in the first term. We got a New START treaty to reduce nuclear weapons between the United States and Russia. We got permission to resupply our troops in Afghanistan by traveling across Russia. We got Russia to sign on to our sanctions against Iran and other very important commitments. So, look, in diplomacy, you are always trying to see how you can figure out the interests of the other to see if there isn't some way you can advance your security and your values. When Putin came back in the fall of 2011, it was very clear he came back with a mission. And I began speaking out as soon as that happened because there were some fraudulent elections held and Russians poured out into the streets to demand their freedom. And he cracked down and, in fact, accused me of fomenting it. So we now know that he has a mixed record, to say the least, and we have to figure out how to deal with him.
What's your relationship with him?
Well, my relationship with him, it's interesting. It's it's one I think
we just get it like Facebook gets complicated.
Respect. We've had some very tough dealings with one another, and I know that he's someone that you have to continually stand up to because, like many bullies, he is somebody who will take as much as he possibly can unless you do. And we need to get the Europeans to be more willing to stand up. I was pleased they put sanctions on after Crimea and eastern Ukraine and the downing of the airliner, but we've got to be more united in preventing Putin from taking a more aggressive stance in Europe and the Middle East.
We want to turn right now to the issue of balancing national security concerns with the privacy rights of Americans. That brings us to YouTube and this question.
Still a little interesting.
Hi, my name is Marquez Brownlee, and I've been making YouTube videos about electronics and gadgets for the past 7 years. I think America's future success is tied to getting all kinds of tech right. Tech companies are responsible for the encryption technology to protect personal data, but the government wants a back door into that information. So do you think it's possible to find common ground, and where do you stand on privacy versus security?
So Governor O'Malley.
Thank you. I believe whether it's a back door or a front door, that the American principle of law should still hold, that our federal government should have to get a warrant, whether they want to come through your back door or your front door. And I also agree, Lester, with Benjamin Franklin, who said no people should ever give up their privacy or their freedoms in a promise for security. So
he's been dropping. Frederick Douglass, Benjamin Franklin,
with Silicon Valley and other bright people in my own state of Maryland, around the NSA. They can actually figure this out. But there are certain immutable principles that will not become antique things in our country so long as we defend our country and its values and its freedoms. And one of those things is our right to be secure in our homes and our right to expect that our federal government should have to get a warrant. I also want to say that while we've made some progress on the Patriot Act, I do believe that we need an adversarial court system there. We need a public advocate. We need to develop jurisprudence so that we can develop a body of law that protects the privacy of Americans in the information and digital age.
That's Tom. You have all talked about what you would do fighting ISIS over there, but we've been hit in this country by homegrown terrorists, from Chattanooga to San Bernardino. The recent shooting of a police officer in Philadelphia. How are you going to fight lone wolves here?
Yeah, Lester, year in and year out, I was the leader of the U.S.
That's my question, Senator Sanders. I wasn't clear. I apologize.
Okay. I just wanted to add, in the previous question, I voted against the USA Patriot Act for many of the reasons that Governor O'Malley mentioned. But it is not only the government that we have to worry about, it is private corporations. You would all be amazed, or maybe not, about the amount of information private companies and the government has in terms of the websites that you access, the products that you buy, where you are this very moment. And it is very clear to me that public policy has not caught up with the explosion of technology. So yes, we have to work with Silicon Valley to make sure that we do not allow ISIS to transmit information.
But in terms of lone wolves, the threat,
right. What we have got to do there is, among other things, as I was just saying, have Silicon Valley help us to make sure that information being transmitted through the internet or in other ways by ISIS is in fact discovered. But I do believe we can do that without violating the constitutional and privacy rights of the American people.
We have to go to a break, and when we come back, we're going to get to some of the burning questions these candidates have yet to answer.
We're really eager to talk. Burning. I see where you're at, Lester.
All right. Okay. So, I don't know that part. I did not get upset at all during that part.
You did. You were pretty calm.
Yeah, it was calm.
You kept it together. Well, I think, listen, foreign policy is it's extremely complex, as it should be. It requires like a really nuanced perspective on things, and I think they had a healthy debate about it. it's not Bernie's strong suit. Hillary was a very successful Secretary of State. There's no question about that. And from what I was talking to someone recently who worked under her administration, and she was beloved from what I've heard. So she's very strong there.
Yeah. So I don't know how strong she's going to be on foreign policy against a Republican candidate, because they're really good at smearing her and Benghazi and just using certain things that didn't go so well during the Obama administration against her, especially when it comes to foreign policy.
Right.
Some of the attacks are unwarranted, but I think that they're good at attacking her on that. Bernie is not strong in foreign policy, but I think his answers were actually fine. He wants to focus more on getting other countries in the Middle East to do their part. A lot of the pressure's on us. A lot of the burden is on us, and part of the burden is because we want it to be our burden. There are vested interests that play a role in us wanting to be involved in the Middle East. But nonetheless, I thought Bernie's answer was pretty good. It wasn't strong, but it was good.
The idea of we need to have Muslim armies in Muslim countries taking this fight on is spot on.
It is, yeah.
And that sounds a lot like Rand Paul, because that's what he says exactly the same thing. And it kind of tells me that those are the two most independent guys when it comes to foreign policy. I would say that that's probably the best idea to have. That's what got Al Qaeda started in the first place. So Osama bin Laden was pissed off that we went into the Middle East to push back Iraq out of Kuwait, and he was upset that Saudi Arabia let them do that, and that's what got this whole thing started. So yes, when we can have more Muslim countries taking on a problem that's Muslim, I think that's a great idea.
Absolutely. So the other thing that they mentioned in that segment of the debate was privacy. And what I would love to see is a candidate stand up there and say, hey, you know what? All this fear-mongering about ISIS, we all need to get over it and not let go of our constitutional rights in the name of national security. This is all a facade. This is all a way of us giving away our rights, and we need to stop. No one up there said that. I wish Bernie would have said that, but I'm just keeping it real. That's what happened. The backdoor, front door talk needs to. We need better words.
Think of a better metaphor for these things.
Because as soon as clowns like me hear backdoor, I'm like,
then it's over. Then exactly.
I'm not paying attention.
I don't get it. What are you guys talking about?
Talking about butt sex.
Oh.
now you're listening. Now you're paying attention.
Yeah.
If only they'd been. If Bernie had been more clear about that, that everyone would have been paying more attention. I think
he really got smeared with the butt sex.
Oh. So feeling the burn there.
Yes. But every politician has to find a very delicate balance between making all of these finicky, scared Americans feel safe and also protecting their rights, like the right to not have the government indiscriminately spy on every American.
Well, and Bernie did bring it up. He was like, the average American citizen would be appalled at the access to information. And I think a lot of people don't have much to hide, and perhaps just that, it doesn't resonate with them. They're not worried about it.
Yeah.
I think other Americans are very concerned about privacy versus security.
I think anybody who's not concerned about privacy because they're not doing anything wrong should go out to making a murderer.
Right.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's such a great point.
I've said this before. I'm like, if really we want a political revolution, we just need to get Bernie a Netflix series. We'd be good.
Yes.
Let's do it.
Shit, he said something good. Oh, the one good thing he said, he missed it. Can someone tell us what he said? Does anybody know? Nobody knows. Someone tweet at me what he just said.
I wanted to say, and I'll do it quickly.
Please.
I was very pleased that leaders of President Obama's administration went out to Silicon Valley last week and began exactly this conversation about what we can do consistent with privacy and security. We need better intelligence cooperation. We need to be sure that we're getting the best intelligence that we can from friends and allies around the world. And then we've got to recognize our first line of defense against lone wolf attacks is among Muslim Americans. And it is not only shameful, it is dangerous for the kinds of comments you're hearing from the Republican side. We need to be reaching out and unifying our country against terrorist attacks and lone wolves and working with Muslim Americans to do that.
Just a quick follow-up on Secretary Clinton. Just a moment, Governor. Secretary Clinton, you said that the leaders from the
Really,
Italian
Martin?
community went to Silicon Valley, they were flatly turned down. They got nowhere.
That is not what I've heard. Let me leave it at that.
Andrea, I need to talk about Homeland Security and preparedness. Ever since the attacks of September 11th, 30 seconds. Ever since the attacks of September 11th, my colleagues, Democratic and Republican mayors, Democratic and Republican governors, made me their leader on Homeland Security and preparedness. Here in the homeland, unlike combating ISIL abroad, we're almost like it's your body's immune system. It's able to protect your body against bad bugs, not necessarily because it outnumbers them, but it's better connected. The fusion centers, the biosurveillance systems, better prepared first responders. But there's another front in this battle, and it is this. That's the political front. And if Donald Trump wants to start a registry in our country of people by faith, he can start with me, and I will sign up as one who is totally opposed to his fascist appeals that wants to vilify American Muslims. That can do more damage to our democracy than anything.
All right, that's time.
So aggressive.
This is the first time that
I just get a very brief response. Very
30 seconds.
And I agree with what the Secretary said and what Governor
They're all regressive.
But here's an issue that we also should talk about. We have a $600 billion military budget. It is a budget larger than the next 8 countries. Unfortunately, much of that budget continues to fight the old Cold War with the Soviet Union. Very little of that budget, less than 10%, actually goes into fighting ISIS and international terrorism. We need to be thinking hard about making fundamental changes in the priorities of the Defense Department.
All right, Secretary Clinton, this is the first time that a spouse of a former president could be elected president. You have said that President Clinton would advise you on economic issues, but be specific if you can. Are you talking about a kitchen table role on economics, or will he have a real policy role?
Well, it'll start at the kitchen table. We'll see how it goes from there. And you don't hang out with your husband. I don't know. I'm going to have the very best advisors that I can possibly have. And when it comes to the economy and what was accomplished under my husband's leadership in the 90s, especially when it came to raising incomes for everybody and lifting more people out of poverty than at any time in recent history.
He did that by raising taxes.
I'm going to ask for his ideas. I'm going to ask for his advice. And I'm going to use him as a goodwill emissary to go around the country to find the best ideas we've got. Because I do believe, as he said, everything that's wrong with America has been solved somewhere in America. We just have to do more of it, and we have to reach out, especially into poor communities and communities of color, to give more people their own chance to get ahead.
Senator Sanders, a 30-second response.
Great ideas, Governor O'Malley, Secretary Clinton. But here's the truth.
Tell me.
If you have an administration stacked with Wall Street appointees, they can accomplish very much. So here's a promise that I make. I mentioned a moment ago how corrupt the system is. Goldman Sachs, paying a $5 billion fine, gives this country in recent history a Republican Secretary of Treasury, a Democratic Secretary of Treasury. Here's a promise. If elected president, Goldman Sachs is not going to bring forth a Secretary of Treasury for a Sanders administration.
There you go. He's going to go to...
Let me ask you a question. You called Wilson's past transgressions, quote, totally disgraceful and unacceptable. Senator, do you regret saying that?
I was asked a question. You know, one of the things, Andrea, and that question annoys me. I cannot walk down the street, Secretary Clinton knows this, without being told how much I have to attack Secretary Clinton. Want to get me on the front pages of the paper, I make some vicious attack. I have avoided doing that, trying to run an issue-oriented campaign. I was asked a question.
You didn't have to answer it that way, though.
Well,
Why did you?
then if I don't answer it, then it's another front page. So yes, and I mean this seriously. You know that. We've been through this. Yes, his behavior was deplorable. Have I ever once said a word about that issue? No, I have not. I'm going to debate Secretary Clinton, Governor O'Malley, on the issues facing the American people got Bill Clinton's personal vote.
From the Republican debate. It's so obvious.
We'll continue from Charleston right after this.
So when you get an amazing answer like that from Bernie and you get some real talk, it's what burns me up is that how much of this coverage of this debate is it's just preaching to the choir, right? People who already believe that, are Republicans, are people who are really undecided truly watching. I mean, it's, again, buried on a holiday weekend. Yeah. It's so frustrating because this sort of discourse is really what could possibly sway people, or, and again, like, it's so different from the GOP debate, but who's really watching both outside of everyone, sitting at this desk? Right. It sucks.
You're saying the Democrats, again, are shitty at campaigning and messaging?
Oh. Have you heard that before?
I've heard that before because that's exactly what it is. It's like, hey, we've got, again, 8 years ago we had Barack Obama, a guy who invigorates people. He actually inspires people. Again, we have it again this time, but it's the real deal this time. Hey, let's try to keep it a secret. Let's don't let people, because the more people find out about Bernie, the better it is for the Democrats. The better it is for progressive ideas. So let's keep that hidden because we have a corporatist named Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
I was going to say, it's better for the DNC.
Yes, who wants to keep that because she likes the way things are. She likes everybody to be a little bit Republican. Not a little, a lot. She likes the center-right government. She likes to be in bed with Wall Street. She likes to be in bed with corporations. She's pro-TPP. She's against real Democrats. That's how can you have the chairman of the DNC who is not down with democratic values, which is what we have?
Right.
She's not a new dealer.
Yeah, and that's why so many people have been petitioning to make her step down as the head of the DNC because all of these weekend debates are decisions that are made under her watch, and she has, an interest in doing this because she's supporting Hillary.
Yeah, and if John can't get her to crack, I mean, then who can?
Right.
Really? Yeah.
If who can't get her to crack?
John chatted with her, right?
Oh, Johnny. Yeah. Oh, Johnny Pie. Yes.
Johnny Pie. Yeah. I mean, I guess it's just, to me, we have such a polarizing system, and generally people they're either going to be Republican or Democrat. They either listen to Fox News or they listen to MSNBC or whatever it is, or they listen to us or they, listen to Bill O'Reilly. And there's not a lot of people who are willing to do the due diligence of watching both things. Yeah. Whatever pops up in the news cycle. It's just tough because you can't have an honest discourse. People don't really have all the information. They don't get to watch everything that's happening.
And remember, being an active political person, taking part in our democratic process does take some resources that a lot of people don't have.
Exactly.
And one of those resources is time, right?
Yes.
Sitting down and watching a 2 or 3 hour long debate.
Right.
Shit, even voting is difficult.
Voting is difficult. Exactly. I mean, there should be a national holiday
on election Tuesday. You have to take time, especially if you're, someone who's not even, you make minimum wage, which we all know is shit, and you can't, you're on your break.
They should have to send you a ballot in your gas bill, right? Like that should come with your electric bill, your gas bill. Here's your ballot, vote.
Yes.
Then you return it or whatever. And you should be able to vote online. And when Hillary Clinton was saying that it starts at the kitchen table, was she saying that the postman always rings twice, sort of a way, or what was she saying? I got a little heated.
That's cheap. She does. I have to give it to Hillary. I mean, I've mentioned it. Her great cheekbones and very cheeky when she's smiling. You're kind of like, what's going on there, Hillary?
Yeah. Well, she's good at debating because even when she's being attacked, even when she's lying to us, she keeps her calm. And she's a politician. She's been doing this her entire life. She's very, very good at it. But anyone who is an invested voter, and I agree with you, Jimmy, I think the majority of people who are watching this on a Sunday night are invested voters. They're educated voters. They know what the reality is. Are going to watch this debate and they're going to realize that Hillary is, in a lot of cases, not answering the questions or just straight out lying, especially when it comes to regulating the banks. That for me is her biggest downfall in this debate so far. Just how
transparent
she is. Yes,
it's very. That's the thing. It's like it's one thing to be dishonest. It's one thing to be a bullshitter, but it's one thing to be transparent while you're doing it. It's like you're not speaking to the middle America. You're speaking to lefties who have time on a Sunday to watch this debate.
Yes,
who know better.
Exactly. All right, let's see what's going on now.
Say tonight that you haven't gotten a chance to say. Let's start with Governor.
Well, they always throw this one out.
I want to give him a noogie. The question was, what is one thing that you haven't had a chance to say?
Didn't say that coming, did you?
So much, but we're going to have to get 20 minutes to do it. So, I believe there are many issues. I want 60 seconds to this.
60 seconds. We appreciate it.
Talk about
there are so many issues that we haven't been able to discuss here. We have not fully discussed immigration reform and the deplorable number of immigrant detention camps that our nation is now maintaining. We haven't discussed the shameful treatment that the people of Puerto Rico, our fellow Americans, are being treated with by these hedge funds that are working them over. We haven't discussed the fact that in our own hemisphere we have the danger of nation-state failures because of drug traffickers in Honduras and Guatemala and El Salvador. I guess the bottom line is this. Look, we are a great people when we act at home and abroad, based on the beliefs that unite us. Our belief in the dignity of every person, our belief in our own common good. There is no challenge that is too great for us to overcome, provided we bring forward in these divided times new leadership that can heal our divides here at home and bring our principles into alignment abroad. We're on the threshold of a new era of American progress, and I believe we have only need to join forces together and cross that threshold into a new era of American prosperity.
I know it's a movie.
Thanks a lot.
Or something.
Well, Lester, I spent a lot of time last week being outraged by what's happening in Flint, Michigan. And I think every single American should be outraged. We've had a city in the United States of America where the population, which is poor in many ways and majority African American, has been drinking and bathing in lead-contaminated water. And the governor of that state acted as though he didn't really care. He had requests for help that he basically stonewalled. I'll tell you what, if the kids in a rich suburb of Detroit had been drinking contaminated water and being bathed in it, there would have been action. So I sent my top campaign aide down there to talk to the mayor of Flint to see what I could do to help. And I issued a statement about what we needed to do. And then I went on a TV show and I said it was outrageous that the governor hadn't acted, and within 2 hours he had. I want to be a president who takes care of the big problems and the problems that are affecting the people of our country every day.
Thank you. Senator Sanders.
That was a good statement. Really good statement. That was good.
Senator Clinton was right, and what I did, which I think is also right, is demanded the resignation of the governor. A man who acts that irresponsibly should not stay in power. Now, we are a great nation, and we've heard a lot of great ideas here tonight. But let's be honest and let's be truthful. Very little is going to be done to transform our economy and to create the kind of middle class we need unless we end a corrupt campaign finance system which is undermining American democracy. We have got to get rid of super PACs. We have got to get rid of Citizens United.
Yes.
And what we have got to do is create a political revolution which revitalizes democracy, which brings millions of young people and working people into the political process to say loudly and clearly that the government of the United States of America belongs to all of us and not just a handful of wealthy campaign contributors.
All right, well, thank you. And thanks to all of you for being here tonight, shedding light on some of the differences as Americans get ready to vote. I also want to thank the Congressional Black Caucus Institute, certainly my friend and colleague, Andrea Mitchell. This has been great. It's been a great, spirited conversation, and American people appreciate it. Let me turn it over to my friend Chuck Todd now. Chuck?
All right.
We get rid of Chuck.
Done with NBC.
Okay.
All right, so let's go ahead and do a summary, just so you guys know how the rest of our coverage tonight is going to work. We're going to do a quick summary here in the studio, and then we're going to toss to the gentlemen in South Carolina, and they're going to give you the biggest winners, biggest losers, biggest fail, controversies, all of that. Yes, so definitely stick around for that, but let's do a quick summary amongst ourselves and kind of discuss what we felt about the debate. I'm going to start off by saying that this Democratic debate was the best debate. And not just the best debate of the Democrats, but best debate in this election cycle so far. There were clear, detailed outlines of what they intend on doing on a number of really important issues.
issues that haven't been mentioned in previous debates did come up, including O'Malley talking about climate change, which made me very happy. O'Malley, in my opinion, still doesn't really stand a chance, so I was kind of frustrated that he was included. I'd like more time for Bernie and Hillary to hash it out. But they talked about a number of things, and healthcare and the banks, in my opinion, stood out the most in terms of their disagreements and their arguments. What did you guys think?
I think it was a really stellar debate. You know, spirited, I have to agree with Lester. I think the American people who watched would appreciated the dialogue. And it seemed, from Bernie, I was really impressed right out of the gate. He was, aggressive and feisty. I think Hillary showed her true colors as a master debater. I mean, she kept her cool. Master debater.
She master debates through the back door. So.
Yeah. She master debates on the kitchen table. All right, we're done. I think that she held her own, and so it was an interesting conversation. And when O'Malley was able to get a word in, I know, just giggle.
I've held my own opinion. The point is,
but I appreciated. I enjoyed watching it. You know,
I did too. I have to be. I was not looking forward to this debate. Maybe my expectations were so low that I was pleasantly surprised. But there was a lot of great spirited discussion.
Sure, which is why it's so frustrating that probably nobody watched it.
So let's talk about some of the big
wrap up. So let me. With you on that because I was drinking coffee the whole time because I really wanted to take a nap. I didn't want to come here and do this at all. I was like, who gives a shit? Nobody's going to be watching this or whatever. And then again, I get worked up about it. Whenever I see Hillary Clinton acting like a right-winger, which she does often, I think that's what, and her numbers are falling just as fast as they did against Barack Obama. So a real liberal comes along. Turns out America is liberal. America is progressive. It's been proven over and over again. That's why they voted Barack Obama in such overwhelming numbers the first time, because they wanted FDR. We want FDR. Still, we want him. And now Bernie Sanders is proposing that. Hillary Clinton still doesn't get it. She's still acting exactly like a person who doesn't have a reason why she wants to lead the country. Bernie Sanders has got nothing but reason. So the big winner tonight, no doubt, was Bernie Sanders. He's the big winner here. Hillary Clinton, big loser. NBC comes out doing an okay job, I think, Lester Holt. But isn't it weird that Andrea Mitchell gets to be a moderator for Bernie Sanders? Bernie Sanders, who went after Alan Greenspan for years, and his wife gets to moderate him. Can you imagine if Ken Starr's wife was asking questions of Hillary Clinton?
Yeah, that's a good point. And that would be awkward.
Yeah.
It seemed to be a little tougher on Bernie Sanders, but not to the point where I feel like she was being unfair, to be honest with you.
Right.
But I think there is this marriage of media, journalism, and politics, and it's not a good situation because obviously journalists are supposed to do their jobs. They're supposed to hold people in power accountable for their actions, and oftentimes that doesn't happen. Usually they get to carry out their own political agendas. I think that this debate, even if you disagree with Jimmy that the country isn't really progressive, the country definitely knows what the issue is in politics, and that's the fact that money's corrupting everything. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or Republican. A lot of Americans know what the problem is, and the only person in that debate that kept driving that point home was Bernie.
No, Bernie owns it, and I think that message resonates across the polarization of American politics, and that's why he can beat a Republican, no matter how fucking crazy they are, because he wears it. And he is populist to the core, and this political revolution talk, which is in some ways very un-American because we're not, we're all about these very calm transitions of power. What he's talking about is he's really trying to rile people up around a very basic principle, which is you're getting screwed. You're getting screwed. You need to know and you need to act. And I'm giving you a platform, and I'm asking you to. He's literally like, the only way I can do this. And my only strategy, and what separates me from Obama, which, we're talking about the audacity of hope, is that I have the audacity to work with you instead of fucking corporate America.
Yeah, and the thing that turned a lot of Americans on to Obama when he was running against Hillary was that he seemed to be an anti-establishment politician.
Yes.
But his core message wasn't to get money out of politics. His core message was, I'm change you can believe in, right? I'm going to bring our troops home. At that time, the war was probably the thing that Americans cared about the most. The economy was something Americans cared about the most. He said that he would reform the banks. He didn't do that. He did 5% of that, to be fair to him. But Bernie, is principled on what he's protesting, what his platform is based on. He does want to get money out of politics. He's practicing what he preaches, and that's something that does resonate with a lot of Americans. Let's quickly talk about two of the issues really in detail because I think it's important. So healthcare. Jimmy, you got really riled up about that because Hillary kind of lied about her healthcare position.
Well, again, it's just like, why are you trying to make this a deal? We all know that you fought for single payer. We all want single payer healthcare. That's a democratic value. You actually castigated Barack Obama for it 7 or 8 years ago. Bernie showed that video, so we all know. And the people who are watching this debate know all that stuff. So we see you being transparent. That's what we hate about Republicans when they get up there and deny science, they deny fact, they deny reality. That's what people hated about George Bush and the right wing, and that's what people like about Democrats is that they do accept reality, and we do accept science, and we do accept facts, and we don't try to bullshit our own base, which is what Hillary's doing, and this is what's going to lose it for her. I guarantee you this is a bad, her numbers will go down tomorrow.
I just don't want people to listen to what she's saying about how, okay, the Affordable Care Act is a good starting point, now we're going to build off that, and then have Americans be complacent with that answer. Do not be complacent. They are not going to change anything. The Affordable Care Act was passed during Obama's first term. If they wanted to build off of it and lead to more affordable health care for Americans, they would have at least fought for that now, but they haven't fought for it yet. I don't believe them. I don't believe that they're going to fight harder for affordable health care. Right now, what we have in terms of health care, even though there are some good things, like they can't deny you if you have a pre-existing condition, if you're 26, you can stay on your parents'
Sure, there has been progress.
There's been some progress, but the big issue is that we're forced to buy private insurance, and there are no cost controls.
None.
So a lot of people, myself included, have health insurance, even through your job, and you're paying more than you've ever paid before.
Ever. So it's, again, but we haven't brought down the cost of healthcare.
Yeah.
We still pay twice as much than the rest of the world, in developed world, and we get worse outcomes. I just had so I had to go in for a foot thing anyway. They didn't pay for it. They sent me a letter, Blue Cross, saying, hey, where does this injury take place? It wasn't injury. I just hurt it hurts. I went to the doctor. Said they never want to pay.
Yeah.
And what Bernie Sanders is doing is you go to the doctor, just like Medicare. Nobody says, give me your insurance. I got to know we're going to double bill you. And we're going to find out, give us your money first, and we'll see. And they just take care of you, which is what we're supposed to be able to do because we're the richest country in the world that the face of the earth has ever seen. We have an economy twice the size of China still. We can afford college for everybody, healthcare for everybody without blinking. Just get rid of the bombs for a year.
So now let's talk about the banks, because that was honestly where Bernie did shine the most. Let's go to video number 11. This is Hillary Clinton and Bernie talking about Wall Street money.
And President Obama has led our country out of the Great Recession. Senator Sanders called him weak, disappointing. He even in 2011 publicly sought someone to run in a primary against President Obama. Now, I personally believe that President Obama's work to push through the Dodd-Frank bill and then to sign it was one of the most important regulatory schemes we've had since the 1930s. So I'm going to defend Dodd-Frank, and I'm going to defend President Obama for taking on Wall Street, taking on the financial industry, and getting results.
But here is the issue. Secretary touched on it. Can you really reform Wall Street when they are spending millions and millions of dollars on campaign contributions and when they are providing speaker fees to individuals? So it's easy to say, well, I'm going to do this and do that. But I have doubts when people receive huge amounts of money from Wall Street. I am very proud. I do not have a super PAC. I do not want Wall Street's money. I'll rely on the middle class and working families for my campaign contributions.
I have a question for you.
All right, so he really emphasized getting the money out of politics. He really emphasized that he's not the politician who is receiving money from these super PACs.
So Anna, when Hillary Clinton, with a straight face at the top of her lungs, over applause, starts screaming that Barack Obama took on Wall Street and I support. Who does she think she's talking? We know that he didn't take on Wall Street. Yeah. It's well documented that he didn't take on Wall Street. And anybody again,
he bailed them out. Yeah, and that's what I mean. That's all.
We bailed him out, and we know that Barack Obama literally went to Wall Street and said, "I'm the only thing standing between you and the mob. I'm going to protect you." We know that he literally said that.
I want to go to one more video on this issue. Hopefully it contains the part that had me jumping for joy during the debate. Let's take a look at that. We'll come back. Video number 13. Sorry about that.
Goldman Sachs recently fined $5 billion. Goldman Sachs has given this country 2 secretaries of Treasury, one on the Republicans, one on the Democrats. The leader of Goldman Sachs is a billionaire who comes to Congress and tells us we should cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Secretary Clinton, and you're not the only one, so I don't mean to just point the finger at you. You've received over $600,000 in speaking fees from Goldman Sachs in 1 year. I find it very strange that a major financial institution that pays $5 billion in fines for breaking the law, not one of their executives is prosecuted, while kids who smoke marijuana get a jail sentence.
I love that line.
I know.
I love that line.
It's so good because he's basically like, Wall Street gets bailed out for bankrupting America, and a bunch of kids smoking dope have to go to jail because they cleaned out the fucking fridge.
Yes. That's such a great line. I love that. I thought that it really hit the nail on the head. It touches on 2 issues that I'm passionate about personally. Look, I mean, if you want to tout Dodd-Frank as strong regulation against the banks, how can you say that when subprime mortgages are still being doled out to minorities who are being deceived into thinking that they can afford these homes or they can afford to pay back these loans? It's ridiculous. Our housing market is going to crash again. There are no regulations that actually go after these big banks. I know that you've been deceived into thinking that, but Dodd-Frank, if anything, goes after smaller banks, making the big banks even bigger, even more powerful. And Bernie touched on that during the debate as well. He did so in a very accessible way, in a way that Americans can understand. And I mean, how can you agree with anyone on that panel other than Bernie Sanders?
I mean, if you're a progressive, you're a liberal, you're a Democrat, what Bernie Sanders is, it's almost as if Bernie Sanders is in the Republican debate when he's talking about Wall Street.
Yeah.
It's almost because, and it's all bullshit, that what Hillary Clinton is, we know you have a record. You and your husband deregulated Wall Street, and within a decade it crashed. When you repealed Glass-Steagall, within a decade it crashed. And we all saw it coming. I was a comedian in 2006, and I knew what was happening. So I know you knew what was happening, and you already gave your response 2 debates ago that you went down to NASDAQ and waved your finger. NASDAQ wasn't the problem. Again, who do you think you're talking to? Who does Hillary Clinton think she's talking to in the Democratic debate? You're talking to the most informed voters.
Right. Well, I think in establishment politics, usually you get to choose for the better of 2 evils, right? And so you get away with lying because you're the better of 2 evils. But thankfully, during this debate and during the Democratic primaries, we don't get a false choice, okay? We don't get 2 politicians that are pretty much the same but differ on one social issue.
Right, just trading platitudes.
Yes. Right now, we have 2 candidates that are very different when it comes to the core of the issue in America, and that's money in politics. There's only one candidate that wants to do something about that, and that's Bernie Sanders.
I just really need a gift of Sanders' side-eye when Hillary was speaking. That was his best mime performance I've seen. I mean, he's really amped up, I think, his ability to show some a real emotion around what's going on and to sort of loosen up. And I think that that's what matters on television. We just know that when that side of being a politician, and it was good to see Bernie utilizing that, to his advantage. I am a convert. I really honestly just felt like when it came to Hillary, when this whole thing started, I looked at Bernie and I was like, I like what he has to say, but I just don't think he's electable. And this is very early on. And it's all, I've really come full circle on that. And obviously it's easier for me to say when he's polling well, but I mean, he's proven me wrong in that he has shown a real aptitude and potential for mobilizing this country around a very basic principle that resonates across a polarized nation. And
I think
that's exciting.
I agreed with you when it first started. I thought that he was a flawed messenger, right? And so that was the problem, not his message, but himself. And he still needs to turn his hands upside down instead of going like this, like he's asking for more lemons.
But I actually love that about him. I think it makes him authentic and,
it's
relatable.
So I'm with you. I didn't want to get hurt again. I didn't want to get my hopes up again. But now I did. Now my hopes are up again, and I really think Bernie's going to. I was talking to his Iowa coordinator, Pete D'Alessandro, and he was talking about how he has these high school kids coming into phone bank for him. And somebody from NBC News said, "Oh yeah, they get high school credit for doing that." He goes, "Yeah, but they're here every day. They only have to be here one day to get their high school credit. They're here every day." So that's a good sign, I think, Bernie Sanders. And that was a great question when they asked Hillary, why does young people favor Bernie 2-1? She didn't prep for that question. She didn't know what to say. She just started talking, and it was funny. And that makes me laugh.
She probably had flashbacks, from,
2007.
To that. Exactly. Yes. When young people came out of the woodwork.
Same thing's happening again.
But I think that's why she's being so. She was actually surprisingly the one that was playing defense quite a bit during that debate, and we were expecting Bernie to be the one to play defense. And he was so well prepared, and his answers, I think, came off as popular with the audience, definitely popular with us. And again, the most important thing is that his message is accessible, and I think it is accessible. I think people understand what he's about. His weakest points would probably be foreign policy, but I think he did a decent job in answering those questions as well.
I agree.
And overall, it was a really good debate for Bernie Sanders. But I am curious to see what the guys in...
Can I just make one more point before we throw it to South Carolina, is that I think at some point, Democrats are going to realize Hillary's a bad campaigner. She's a bad campaigner. It's been her race to lose both times. She's going to lose it both times.
All right, strong statements from Jimmy, but I think I agree with you. All right, we're going to toss over to our friends in South Carolina. They're going to take over the rest of the debate coverage for tonight. For everyone else, we love you guys, and we'll see you later.
How's it going? Hey. South Carolina. Debate ended very recently. We were enjoying the coverage, as many of you were at home. Jordan, thanks for joining me. Michael Shore is going to be around a little bit later. And I believe we're also going to have a guest from SourceFed, which would be really cool. We're going to be continuing on with their stream after ours concludes. Okay, so quick summary from your point of view, the debate compared to past debates. What did you think?
I think Bernie took it up like 2 temperatures, not quite, not quite 360, but he got a little bit more feisty. You saw on Wall Street in particular, his line about Secretary Clinton, her speeches to Goldman Sachs, I thought was pretty good. I think that Bernie also was a lot stronger in terms of foreign policy, which a lot of people aren't looking at him for. But he had
low expectations.
Right. He talked credibly about that. Hillary, as I predicted in our pre-show, put her arm around President Obama as much as she can. Yes, played well to the crowd. When she was attacked by Bernie, she pretty much pivoted to President Obama, trying to make it seem like Bernie was criticizing the president's record on things like healthcare and the economy, Dodd-Frank, and then raised her voice. I think we talked off camera. You can scream, but it doesn't mean you're right. So it was kind of, I think, a stalemate. I don't think anyone, really is going to come away with this significantly higher in the polls. I will say, Martin O'Malley, we'll get to lines later, but I think he pretty much, the statements he made was emblematic of his campaign tonight, which was pretty much a disappearing act.
Well, why don't we transition to that? So, as we do always, we're going to talk about winners, losers, best lines, all of that. So why don't we start off with losers? Okay, we'll start off on a high note. Is there much debate really to be had? I think Sanders and Hillary lost.
I think in the debate lexicon, for the audience, when they came back from commercial, Lester Holt excluded Martin O'Malley for some reason, saying, Secretary Clinton, Senator Sanders, I'll give you 30 seconds. Martin O'Malley, pretty much the emblem of his campaign, said, can I get 30 seconds too? Yeah. I thought that was...
And the guy said no.
Yeah. And that was pretty bad.
That was pretty bad. So very often when we've been doing our winners and losers, I love to throw like the media or the American people or something like that. And I'm going to throw the moderators to some extent here. I know that you have your own problems with some of the moderators, and Jimmy brought them up earlier. But I was about 15 minutes in. I was already done with how dismissive they were of Martin O'Malley, and I totally admit I sent probably 30 dismissive tweets. But that's to be funny on Twitter. I mean, this is the actual moderation of the debate. And maybe you don't think that he should still be around. Maybe you don't think that he has any chance. And you're probably right. But he's on the debate stage. He's actually there. There are hundreds of thousands of Americans that do actually support him. I mean, to give him 10% of the time when there's three candidates, to come back from the break and act as if he doesn't exist, I mean, that's openly insulting. I would be pissed. We had a couple of months ago the Republicans complaining about what they saw to be unfair moderation, bringing up scandals and things like that. I think Martin O'Malley has a legitimate grievance. That said, he was the loser of this debate because we know that, like with SAT essay responses, the amount you write, and in this case the amount you speak, very often correlates with how you're perceived to have done. And he went huge stretches not even talking. They had no interest in going to him. They were totally fine with just Hillary and Bernie bouncing back and forth. And for most of the people watching, that's probably going to be what they wanted. But you can't win if you're at 2% in the polls and in the last debate before the primaries and caucuses start, you're a non-entity.
Well, they talk about, a person can't run for office anymore without billions in their coffers. I mean, you can't run for office if the only chance you have to debate is on Saturday night, the week before Christmas, is on Sunday night, a 3-day weekend, Martin Luther King Day tomorrow, pretty much starting right after football, and you pretty much have a third of the coverage that the people on there. It's not fair to him whether you like him.
A third as much as either of the other.
Right. He really got the shaft tonight. Obviously, he has no chance, but he's a former governor, so I agree with you.
Yeah.
He should have been given more time.
Yeah, and we talked to Debbie Wasserman Schultz earlier today, the chair of the DNC, and obviously we understand, even if she won't admit it, that structuring the debates so that they occur on weekends, that they're extremely rare, is designed to limit how much potential damage can be done to Hillary, which I think shows a weird lack of confidence in a woman who is known to be a good debater, but that's a separate point. But the person who got caught in the crossfire is Martin O'Malley, because without the money and without the nationwide exposure, he desperately needed debates. I don't think that he had it in him to break out, but that was his only way to. And so maybe he'll be around for the next debate. We were talking about that in the pre-show, but at least for this one, he was clearly a loser, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah,
I thought Bernie missed out on a few opportunities. Not really a specific line that would make him a loser, but I wrote down twice where he said, "I completely agree with the secretary." Yeah. He has a knack of doing this,
trying to show if he's going to punch her, he has to occasionally we're not enemies.
But the problem is, it's 2 weeks before the Iowa caucus.
Yeah, that's true.
Her campaign's been coming after him with everything but the kitchen sink this week.
Yeah.
We want your medical records, your flip-flopper on guns, your health insurance.
Dropped dead of a heart attack tomorrow.
Yeah, I wrote down at least 2 times. He said, I agree with the secretary for the most part, or I completely agree with the secretary. We like Bernie Sanders because he's not like a typical politician, but he can't, when you only have X amount of time to talk, you need to come out starkly pointing out what's different.
Yeah, I'm of two minds on that. Just to wrap up the loser conversation, because I agree with you. We want him to be fiery. We want him to be assertive, aggressive. But at the same time, it isn't the Republican debates. We like them to be a little bit more congenial to each other. We understand that these are people who've worked together for decades, off and on, to some extent. And I do think that especially in South Carolina, where he is hoping to pick up a significant chunk of Hillary's supporters, I think he has to be seen to be not too aggressive.
Right.
Point out the facts, but you got to go easy on
the New York in me. I apologize.
Yeah, maybe. Okay, so we'd like to bring on Matt back from SourceFed. How's it going, man? Good to have you here. Now, Matt, you were hanging out in the same spot as us, watching it. There were some funny points, and there were some gaps. Overall, what did you think? Overall, compared to the previous debates.
Compared to the previous debates, I was just very disappointed. I was very disappointed because I was stunned how much I enjoyed Martin O'Malley. He really never got a shot. The fact that he got really just straight up squeezed out of there is a crying shame, because he was trying to say something different.
Yeah.
The problem is Hillary and Bernie both were their talking points.
Yeah.
More or less. Hillary was at her most interesting when she was defending President Obama, when her passion got the better of her, which made her really relatable. And when she was talking about Putin, where you visibly saw her bite her tongue.
Well, and you saw a real reaction.
Yes.
I even thought, you know what? she's kind of charming sometimes. Like, you can't help but see it when she was being real about Putin.
Right.
She has a history with him.
It's true. But the rest of the debate, you're seeing a far more wooden performance than I feel like we're used to seeing from her.
Really?
From her, in my opinion. Bernie, I think he deflected a lot of the blows that had been coming at him going into the debate. I don't know how many people he swayed to his platform over the course of it, but really there is no winner here, and it's certainly not the American people, in my opinion.
Well, why don't we discuss that a little bit more? So the big winner of the debate, who gets SourceFed's number one? If you're saying no one, not even like a narrow win for Bernie or for Hillary?
Honestly, Bernie wins through sheer aggression without being too aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
He was very committed to staying on top of Hillary throughout this debate. He didn't let her crowd him. He didn't let her record crowd him. He didn't let her use his record against him. He cleared stuff up. The last minute release of his health care plan, to me, seemed like it had visibly shaken Hillary straight out of the gate. She regained momentum.
Designed too.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
Because she had to absorb all this new information. She regained momentum very early on, but at the beginning, it was between Bernie and O'Malley, and I wish that O'Malley had gotten more time, because every time that he spoke, I woke up. It wasn't like I was watching videos that I've been seeing for the last month or so over and over and over again. It felt electric, and it's a shame. He's positioning himself to be a VP candidate, and I think he's doing it rather skillfully.
Yeah, some of his early responses, like his opening statement, his comments about reform of the police, I mean, they were perfectly fine, both in the delivery and in the actual substance. Like, were he to actually put into effect most of what he was saying there, that would be pretty good, I would imagine.
Yeah.
But who do you think? Do you think it was very close, or do you think there was a breakout winner?
No, there wasn't a breakout winner. I think Hillary won not because of anything she did, but because Bernie Sanders didn't break through. I didn't see anything from Senator Sanders that really stepped past his performance in other debates. Again, he was on his talking points. Again, he kind of escalated a little bit in terms of going at her, but I don't think he had a moment that's going to be in the news tomorrow.
Yeah.
I don't think Morning Joe and MSNBC and, our friends in the media, there's a shining moment for Bernie Sanders, which keeps it kind of even in Hillary's favor.
I partially disagree. We'll get to that on Best Line, perhaps. But I do agree that I think that Hillary won. And I think that a case could possibly be made that she won on the merits of the actual debate. I mean, I think that Bernie was really strong when he was talking about single-payer health care, when he was talking about campaign finance reform, and when he was talking about reform of Wall Street and her connection both personally and as part of the political establishment to Wall Street and the big banks. And it was especially strong that those seemed to happen back to back. Like, he had a period of 15 to 20 minutes where he came on really strong. Now, were I in LA, maybe I would say, as I have in most other cases, that he has won the debate. I think that she is going to be seen to have won, only because I have to accept the pattern that has been established. People like her. Even when it seems like she delivers the worst performance, people accept what she said. And like you said, he probably delivered more blows than he got, but he's done that in the past. And in the past, people say that he's lost. So I don't think that he performed terribly, but I think that the outcome of this will be people saying that she, at the very least, held him off strongly.
Yeah, I feel like there's an argument to be made that he didn't sway any new voters tonight.
Yeah,
that's it.
Maybe.
Yeah, and real quick, kudos to Lester Holt. We like to knock the media around a lot.
True.
A moderator asked a question about climate change in a presidential debate, so that's a very nice thing.
I think that was like finish off bingo or something.
Yeah.
For them. Okay, so why don't we turn to one of my favorite parts of the post-debate coverage? Was there a best line, or best line of argument, perhaps?
I think Bernie, one of the best lines I saw that really showed his passion was when he said, "The healthcare debate is about who has the guts to take on big pharma."
Yeah.
The audience got into that. I liked that passion. I hadn't heard it from him before. Hillary, I don't think had a best line, but she's very tactful when she's being attacked, to pivoting to the general election.
Yeah.
So she was being attacked, I think it was on Wall Street, and she again pivoted. Well, at least we're talking about Wall Street, our Republican friends, so she's very good at deflecting.
Either to Obama or to the Republicans.
Yes, and she was very good at, asking President Obama to go to the dance with her. Because she was more in love with Barack Obama tonight than we've seen in the past.
Yeah. What do you think about it?
For me, it would honestly be, not that it's going to help him, but O'Malley's response to Marque Brownlee's question about technology, that there shouldn't be a front door or a back door into our information, I thought it was well said, it was well timed, he jumped in when he needed to, and I think that a lot of people, especially in a year where everyone from celebrities to regular people to governments have been the victim of cyber attacks, it was a very, very important point to make, and he was the one who made it first.
Yeah, and I think we've been a little bit frustrated at TYT that the appeals to needing privacy haven't, like, people for some reason don't seem to care anymore.
Yeah.
But I think that the way you just said it, the online specific hacking in the devices, I think that is something that young people especially could be galvanized around. And that's why we don't normally give this award, but I'm going to give it to Marques Brownlee for best question from a YouTuber, because that was a great question. I think Martin O'Malley, you're right, that was a great line. I loved his line about we will not fall to the fascist appeals of people who want to divide us based on religion, and I'll sign up first to be on the list of who's banned based on their religion. I thought that was strong. I think, I don't remember the exact line, but when Bernie was defending, first of all, when he talked about the polls, that he was so eager to talk about, that's a good line. But when he was defending ideologically why we need to work for single-payer healthcare and what it actually represents and how much money it could save a family, I think everybody's worried that all of his extreme plans on healthcare and the economy, once you turn to the general election, people are not going to be amenable to that sort of talk. But I think he shows that he can deliver that message, and he can respond to people who attack him as some sort of loony on the left.
And it was strong. It was strong in contrast to Secretary Clinton, because she was basically saying Republicans will fight us on single payer, so we can't do anything.
So what's the point? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and look, that sort of pragmatism is probably going to appeal to a lot of people, and I can't even say that she's definitely wrong. But I think that if we're talking about who is going to fire up a new generation of voters who perhaps felt left behind by Obama after the first couple of years, saying, we could try, but we'd probably fail, is not going to work the way let's try is going to work.
Yeah.
Do we have a worse line, a fail, anything along those lines?
We might have mentioned it earlier, but I think Martin O'Malley's asking for. Can I get 30 seconds?
10 seconds.
Oh, did he ask 10 seconds?
It was 10 seconds.
Sir, may I have some?
That, or when he asked people to go visit his website, it was just sort of like, just the desperation.
All do that, though.
I know.
And by the way, we're making fun of him, but again, he shouldn't have had to ask.
No.
He was forced into that position by the moderators.
Right.
That might have been it.
It's almost as if they prepped it. They had their prep almost done before Bernie and Hillary petitioned that O'Malley be allowed to be on the debate, and then they just didn't change anything.
It in.
Yeah, they just changed a few.
They cut out one commercial break, gave that 3 minutes to him.
Right.
I do think that maybe it's not an important enough question to qualify, but Hillary's response to why her message hasn't resonated with millennials, she said something like, well, I'm going to keep trying to plug away at them, and the reason I say that is I think that it should represent something to her. Like Obama, he had a message that he didn't necessarily fully make good on, but it did bring in new voters. Yes. And the fact that her message isn't resonating in that way, it should cause some introspection, cause her to stop and think about why that is and why Bernie's message is working.
It was a crucial moment that I felt like she fumbled. Yeah. It was an overly wordy, rehearsed, there was no sincerity in it whatsoever. And there's one thing that young people respond to again and again, it's sincerity, it's authenticity. That was the moment to say, look, I understand that he's got pie in the sky promises, but I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Right out of the gate, I think you're right. Right out of the gate, I think Hillary fumbled also, because Lester Holt asked them, what are your first 3 priorities in office? The third one, she said, and to close the gap for women. And I think she has to be careful how she talks about women, because she doesn't want to make it seem like she's just politicking. Yeah. And I think it came off very calculating that, all right, got to get my women moment in here. Yeah. And I didn't think that was good.
Yeah, and it didn't have to, because on the policies, she does have the right positions to close that gap.
Yeah.
It's more in the messaging, because obviously she does want to gain a couple of points based on support for that. And she's earned those points, so just be natural about it.
The young people she's trying to get can sniff out bullshit.
Can sniff it out, yeah, exactly. And I think that there was a potential for a similar moment for Bernie. They asked him, why is it that Hillary is leading you 2-1 amongst minority voters? I don't know who they're lumping into that, but I think that his response was better in that saying, like, as I continue to put out my message, I think that they will start to resonate. And he has a point. We are still very early in the primaries. He was not a nationwide household name for the past more than 2 decades like Hillary Clinton was. And he might be right. Whereas hers just came off as, I'm blindsided, even though I'm at a debate sponsored by YouTube, maybe young people are going to come up.
Yeah.
But any other last thoughts about the debate?
Just what I said. I think we're kind of leaving where we started, and I don't see a clear breakaway winner, which means Hillary Clinton is the winner.
Yeah. He fended off the attacks that he knew was going to come, but he probably didn't gain too much ground. Yeah.
Or certainly not enough.
Yeah, and the sad thing is this is the last debate before Iowa and New Hampshire. We wish that we could be doing this more often, especially with this atmosphere here. And Martin O'Malley's out there. But unfortunately, that's the end of our live broadcast here. Now, we are going to be transitioning to SourceFed's live commentary.
That's true. So if you go to youtube.com/SourceFed, or if you check the SourceFed Twitter page, we're going to be going live for a full hour on our channel. John's going to be there. Nadeska from Complex is going to be there. Please join us. It's going to be a great discussion.
That's going to be fun. Well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Jordan. Thank you. Always. I imagine you're going to be hitting up interviews soon. Yeah. Okay, well, we hope you get some good stuff. Thank you for joining us, and head over to watch the SourceFed continuing post-debate coverage.